Mr. Bart Sibrel, it's an honor to have you in here, man. I'm glad we can make this happen.
Sure, no problem.
Over the last 2 days, I've been reading your book and watching your documentaries and really diving deep into your background and your whole history of the moon landing. And I was talking to you the other day on the phone, and I was telling you, like, I'm not up to speed on all of the little nuances and like all of the actual evidence that you've gone through for your idea or for your conclusion that the moon landing was a fraud. And then I watched Astronauts Gone Wild, which, by the way, is the best title to a documentary ever created in human history. For people that may have not read your books or seen podcasts with you, can you walk us through how this whole journey started for you?
Yeah, I grew up as the biggest fan of the moon missions, kind of the biggest fanboy, because my father was in the Air Force. I grew up around Air Force bases, aerospace, and even though I was asleep in bed at the time, I was about 4 years old. The next couple of weeks, my father, being a high-ranking officer in the Air Force, got a VIP package of the prints from Apollo 11, alleged first trip to the moon. He gave them to me, and they were like my most cherished possession of all time. And we moved about every couple of years, and wherever we moved to, they were a prominent place, like a shrine, in every bedroom. So from about the age of 4 to 14, if I only saw them once a day, that's about 3,650 times I saw these pictures that allegedly say they're on the moon. So when I'm 14 years old, I saw a television program of one of the first guests on Oprah Winfrey. His name was William Casey. He had the second highest security clearance to von Braun during the Apollo program. He was an English major, and he would edit the grammar of von Braun, whose native language was German, and he would edit the grammar of the generals at the Pentagon who, graduated at West Point, but not in English, more in military tactics. And he confessed he saw a memo from von Braun to the Pentagon warning them that the odds of going to the moon on the very first attempt with 1960s technology was only a 1 in 10,000 chance. So there was a 99.999% chance they would kill the crew on live TV if they tried. So what do you do in poker when you have crap and you want to win? You bluff. And he said that's what they did. So I'm an open-minded 14-year-old, and that's what it takes to see the truth. It says in an ancient text that pride blinds us from seeing the truth. And pride is simply the unwillingness to be wrong. And humility is the willingness to be wrong. And being wrong is great because I'm not walking around in error and I'm learning something new. So I went back to those pictures with new eyes. It was like eyes wide shut. The most famous picture of Aldrin with his arm bent, the suit has wrinkles all in it. It's supposed to be pressurized. How many wrinkles are in a balloon? So the truth is hidden in plain sight. My eyes were wide shut. And then I noticed that the soil in the original print, it was kind of a caramel brown. The background's a grayish blue. They since color corrected that so that the foreground is a grayish blue also. So I could see what appeared to be the end of real soil, and then horizontally left to right, the beginning of a slightly more out of focus fake backdrop. In fact, the smartest AI in the world, just a year ago, Google's neural network, not available to the public, analyzed the pictures. It said the unmanned probes of the lunar surface from China are real, and every single Apollo picture is fake, a fake backdrop. It can analyze the pixels. It's never been wrong. That just came out. News stories or news agencies are suppressing that truth. I saw it as a 14-year-old, so that kind of planted the seed in my mind. I wonder, did they fake the moon landing or not? Fast forward another 10 years, at age 24, I'd become a filmmaker. And a filmmaker's job is to make fake scenes look real. So I could tell you not only were the pictures taken with electrical light with 100% certainty, I could tell you what kind of light because I had them in my production closet. And then as serendipity would have it, I was editing one day for the man who had produced the program I saw 10 years earlier as a 14-year-old. And I'm like, who was that guy in your program who said we didn't go to the moon? I'd like to talk to him. He puts me in touch with them, and being a filmmaker, Bill Casing suggested I produce a documentary about the moon landings being fraudulent. I paid myself a salary for 6 months, did nothing but research. And we can look at these pictures later, but the shadows are inconsistent. The behavior, like you said, of the astronauts is off sync. The Soviets were more advanced. The administrator of NASA resigned before the first mission. All of these things seemed odd to me. And so originally, Danny, I turned down the project for fear that if they fake the moon landing and I start overturning these rocks, it could be dangerous. So I actually turned it down. It wasn't until I read the Bible about 5 times from cover to cover, still wasn't a Christian, but, I'm trying to look for, ultimate truth. Do things make themselves, or is there a God? Evolution says a lower form of life made a higher form of life, so how could something without a brain make a brain? Kind of the opposite of the truth there. And then a judgment to come seems kind of logical. And then if you really think about it, evil and good, that is going on, that battle is going on, and evil or good starts with lies. The evil people lie. And then mankind's greatest accomplishment is putting a man on the moon. And so it had this spiritual smell. There's something important about this. So 5 years later, I changed my mind. I realized if they faked the moon landing, and I assure you with 100% certainty they did, just go to Sibrel.com, S as in Sam, I-B as in boy, R-E-L. You can see all of this for free on the homepage. The faking of the moon landing is so much more profound than if they had actually gone. I mean, either they went and came back with 1960s technology, even though they can't do it today, or the most powerful nation on earth falsified mankind's greatest accomplishment and murdered their own citizens to cover it up. If that's true, and it is, that's so much more profound than if they'd actually gone. I changed my mind. I said, this is important. If the truth doesn't come out, mankind in our country will die.
The thing that really opened the door to this idea for me was that the idea of the moon landing being a hoax was born during the time of the highest distrust of the U.S. government. In 1963, the president was assassinated. In 1974, the first U.S. president resigned. In 1975, the CIA admitted to doing mind control experiments on unwitting humans. And in April, Saigon fell and we lost the Vietnam War. That period in time during the Cold War was when the CIA was doing some of the most sinister shit in its history, as far as we know. So if they're willing to do, if our government is willing to do those things, why wouldn't they be willing to fake the moon landing, which isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily evil in the fact that you're hurting anybody, because you're not hurting anybody. All you're really doing is it's propaganda to push the view of America forward in the public narrative, right?
Yeah, Nixon said at the time, the biggest threat to the United States of America was not China, was not Russia. It was the American people protesting the federal government over the Vietnam War.
Right.
And your insight, Danny, is hitting the nail on the head. According to Robert Kennedy Jr., okay, he has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone does. It's his researched opinion with 100% certainty that the CIA killed the president of the United States because he was going to reform the agency, and they didn't want that.
Well, there's a lot of reasons they killed JFK, right?
Yeah, a bunch.
A ton.
But the point is, this, according to the people who know more information than we do, the CIA killed their own president. And then Robert McNamara said the public was against the Vietnam War. They were protesting it, right? He said we need something like Pearl Harbor, because prior to Pearl Harbor, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II. A day later, 90% were for it, to get even. He said before he died, the whole reason the war was started, the Gulf of Tonkin attack, it never happened. Congress passed a law based on a CIA fabrication. So if they're willing to kill their own president, willing to kill 58,220 of their own soldiers without cause, I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image.
Right.
The difference is, whoever killed JFK, it's still a tragedy. Whoever did the Gulf of Tonkin, it's a tragedy. This is a positive lie. And I come along wanting to take away that sweet candy, and people who say they're anti-corruption are defending it. You have Bill Maher on one end of the liberal spectrum and Glenn Beck on the conservative saying how great it is that Americans were first on the moon. I know America has gotten bad, but at least we were first on the moon. See, they don't realize how bad it has gotten. They did fake the moon landing. There were no independent news coverage, no independent eyewitnesses, and Eugene Krantz, who I spoke to personally, flight director, said even someone in the command center can tell no difference whatsoever between a simulated flight and a, quote, real flight. So this idea that hundreds of thousands of people were involved must make it real. The exact opposite is true. Only 8 people knew that they were making the atomic bomb when it involved 129,500 people.
Right.
You see, that's like saying what a bank teller knows and what the CEO of the bank knows about corruption are completely different. So if someone in the command center can't tell the difference between a simulation and a real flight, how could we as a 4-year-old watching it in our living room or watching it years later? I'm going to have one of those too.
Magic Mind, baby. Here.
Magic Mind.
Get one.
All right.
Shake it up. Cheers.
All right, here we go.
They're
Supposed
beautiful.
to improve your cognitive ability.
Yes, makes your mind better.
Oh, look at that.
Without the jitters of caffeine or energy drinks.
It says it improves your memory.
It does.
The problem is I keep forgetting to drink it.
It improves your memory, your recall. It's got lion's mane, alpha, it's all the good brain stuff, mind sharpener, and energy. Cheers.
All right.
One of the things that's funny about the moon landing conspiracy is you could question 9/11, you can question JFK's assassination, you can question all these other things. But if you question the moon landing, you're a fool. Why is that?
Well, it's offending people. It's like the people who made cartoons about a certain, religious icon. They're offended. There's a famous quote, my book Moon Man, which is audio that I read myself, Kindle or print. There you go.
Moon Man, folks.
It's at Sibrel.com. It's the behind the scenes
Great book.
Account of making my movie, which was financed by someone who builds rockets for NASA who knows that it's fake. You see, I'm offending people's God. That's why they're so offended. There's a quote. Each chapter ends with a quote. One says the likelihood of one individual being right increases in direct proportion to the intensity to which others are trying to prove him wrong. If they really went to the moon, then anyone who says otherwise is an idiot. Then why are there thousands of YouTube videos to reassure people that the so obvious moon landings are real? If I went around saying Mickey Mouse was the first president, do you think there'd be 1,000 videos to reassure people that it was George Washington? Shakespeare said, thou dost protest too much. The reason why they have to prop it up is because it's made of straw. You can prove that the moon landings are fake with logic, not having to look at any video clip or any picture.
In a world where international spy agencies are constantly collecting your data, it's easy to see why companies like NordVPN have grown in popularity. Without protection, emails and online purchases can be intercepted and may not be used for months later. And that's where today's sponsor, NordVPN, comes in clutch. NordVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel, shielding you from your internet providers and online snoopers. It's like having a private conversation in a crowded room. Nobody else can eavesdrop. But NordVPN doesn't stop there. Their dark web monitor keeps an eye out for your credentials on shady corners of the internet. If your information pops up where it shouldn't, you'll get an immediate alert, allowing you to take action before things get out of hand. In a world where mass surveillance is a reality, taking control of your online privacy is essential. With NordVPN, you can browse with confidence, knowing your personal information stays personal. Get premium cybersecurity for the price of a cup of coffee per month. Get up to 76% off your NordVPN plan and go to nordvpn.com/Danny Jones. This will also give you 4 extra months on their 2-year plan. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk. Again, go to nordvpn.com/Danny Jones to get from 56 to 76% off your plan. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
Today, with 5 decades better rockets and computers, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're really claiming, Danny, is that back in 1969, when all of NASA's computers combined had 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts ahead of schedule on the first attempt 1,000 times farther than they can do today with 50 years better technology. So what they're actually saying is, for the first time in the history of the world, technology was greater in the past than in the future, which is impossible, which means they faked it. It's amazing. The truth is right there. And people have made a god out of this, and they refuse to see the truth.
Have you read Annie Jacobson's book, Area 51?
No.
She talks about you and Bill Casing, and I think it's the last chapter. And there's a whole section about the moon landing, and what she was claiming was that there was Soviet disinformation groups that were embedding themselves in the U.S. and that Bill, I don't remember if she said Bill exactly, but there were some people that were heading up some moon landing hoax groups, and that they were essentially Soviet spies trying to sow distrust in this narrative in the U.S. Are you familiar with any of these ideas or these claims?
Yeah, basically that book says the moon landings are real, which is another reason maybe not to trust everything that's in that book. The fact is, you can go to the homepage of Sibrel.com. In the film that you saw, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, we have classified footage. We can show a clip of it. It's one of the first clips I have here of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes from Earth orbit using a 1-foot model of the Earth with a 3rd track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay.
Here,
if you want to,
I want to go through all this stuff. We're going to, but first, what do you know about, or have you talked to any people in Russia or former Soviet Union about this? Whether it be intelligence people, rocket scientists, anybody like that. Have you talked to anyone from there?
Yes, I have. So the 2 reasons that people use over and over again, the moon missions must be real, is you can't keep a secret from hundreds of thousands of people. The fact is, you can, that the atomic bomb involved 129,000 and only 8 people knew what they were doing. The guy in the command center can't tell the difference between a real flight and a fake flight. There's no independent press coverage. The second reason is that the Soviets or the Chinese would have blown the whistle. That's not true. I know someone who personally works in the command center of the Chinese Space Agency, who I've spoken to on multiple occasions. He said everybody there knows that the moon missions are fake. They're blackmailing NASA in exchange for space technology, which Congress has forbidden them to receive. So there's a law that says the United States cannot give or sell space technology to China, but the CIA is doing it anyway so that the Chinese will not blow the whistle. The same thing with the Soviets. The former director of the Space Agency of Russia, the day he resigned, he wasn't allowed to say it when he was on staff. The day he resigned, he said the moon missions are fake. The next day, I get a call from Fox News. Fox News is not your friend. Otherwise,
what was the name of the guy who resigned who said the moon landing was fake?
His name was Dmitry Rotigin.
See if you can find that, Steve.
Yeah. And the next day after he made that announcement, it made the rounds on the internet news. Fox News calls me up and says, we're going to do a special about, whether he went to the moon or not. Fox News is not your friend. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fired Tucker Carlson, who got 100 million views with every broadcast, right? They're in information control. The same with RT. That AI that said the moon missions were fake just a year ago, Vladimir Putin was there. Didn't look surprised at all. We have a video of it on my website, never covered by RT. Well, the Fox News producer said, Bart, we haven't read your book. We haven't seen any of your films, and even if the footage proves that they faked being halfway to the moon, we will conclude that the moon missions are real to reassure people. I watched their special. They found one Russian scientist from 1969 who said, congratulations. And then the narrator says, see, the Russians think we went to the moon, but they failed to mention just 6 weeks earlier the former director of the Russian Space Agency saying the moon missions are fake. You see, the Russians are blackmailing us. The Chinese are blackmailing us. Another good reason for the truth to come out. They can tell the truth about MLK, RFK, JFK, but if they don't tell the truth about the moon landing fraud, the evil people are still in power and the evil people have won. And what they don't realize, these people allegedly in the government who want the truth to come out about various things, the strongest tool to bring down the corruption in the federal government is to show the public that they were duped and made suckers out of the moon landing fraud 6 times. That would unite Republicans and Democrats against corruption. Don't be afraid of the truth, because if they don't announce that truth, they are complicit with it. The evil people have won. We have institutionalized a lie to elementary school children and college students. They did fake the moon landing. You can't have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than today. It's that simple.
So you think Russia and China are blackmailing NASA?
Well, or the federal government, really.
Or the federal government.
Yeah, really the federal government.
So even if Russia or China came out and said, hey, they faked the moon landing, who would believe them anyways?
Well, it depends on what proof they have, because the Chinese probably have landers at the sites up close and can show that the coordinates, there's nothing there. Or if at the most they landed a probe there later to mimic the landing of the Apollo spacecraft.
Have you ever heard of a dude named Hal Povenmire?
No.
Damn it. I'm like 0 for 10 on that one, Steve.
I don't get out much.
There's this elusive guy who allegedly worked for NASA who mapped the moon for the Apollo missions, and his name was Hal Povenmire, secretive guy. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. Where were we? So we wanted to go to start talking about the evidence. So to you, what is the number one best, most solid, grounded piece of evidence?
Let's start with that, Steve. It is clip number 1. Play it in its entirety. It's me narrating a very brief explanation about this classified footage that I found. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. My film cost nearly $1 million. It was financed by someone who builds rockets for NASA, who knows it's fake, who gave it to me as his patriotic duty to expose it. I gave him the benefit of the doubt for as long as possible until I found this footage. This footage, which we're about to see, 2 NBC news directors agreed it proves with 100% certainty that they never left Earth orbit and therefore never went to the moon. They were going to broadcast it nationwide. They flew me to New York, put me up in the Waldorf Astoria, paid me thousands of dollars for the exclusive license. They got a threatening phone call from the federal government saying, don't broadcast it or we'll pull your plug on NBC. That's what we're about to see. There's a 3rd track of audio of the CIA prompting the astronauts not to speak until 4 seconds go by to fake a radio delay. You'll see they're using a 1-foot model of the Earth to pretend to be halfway to the moon. It's dated 2 days into the flight. And just go ahead and hit play for 8 minutes, and my narration on the tape will prove it beyond any doubt. This is what convinced me.
The most.
I remember when I found this tape. It was June 30th, 1999, a Wednesday, I believe. And I just quietly wept. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. How sad is that? And if the person who was the biggest fan can change their mind and reluctantly admit yes, sadly, they did fake it, then I'm sorry. This is the proof that would prove it in a court of law. 2 NBC News directors agreed. It proves they didn't go to the moon. Even my critics agree. What we're about to see is the crew of Apollo 11 faking being halfway to the moon. And what a surprise. 55 years later, they still can't leave Earth's orbit. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon. Go ahead and hit play.
Go for it.
So my critics say, hey, this film that I'm about to show you is widely available. It's not. It never appeared anywhere until my film came out. And what you'll hear is a third track of audio of the CIA prompting the astronauts not to speak until 4 seconds have gone by. Now, what this footage is, and I have an unedited reel of like an hour to an hour and a half of virtually the same shot over and over again. They're claiming that this is a little blue Earth, halfway to the moon looking back, when in fact, this is a circular window of the spacecraft, outside of which is the Earth and low Earth orbit. Now, originally I said it's kind of part of the Earth out the window, which it does look like, but another cinematographer pointed out is what they did is they took a transparent photograph, like a slide or an X-ray that was color. They put it over the circular window. So it's a circular window and, of course, the circular Earth. And they've backlit it with Earthshine. Now, this is still the window. You can see the little, 2 to 3 inch indentation here, like on a ship, because it's a, pressurized bulletproof window, I presume. And, first of all, if they're halfway to the moon, there would be a radio delay. So it would take 2 seconds for the radio signal to go out, 2 seconds for them to come back. They're actually in Earth orbit. This is, you'll see clear proof in a second here why they're still in Earth orbit, or proof that they are. They can't leave Earth orbit for a number of reasons. They don't have enough fuel. They don't have radiation protection and so forth. And by them faking being halfway to the moon proves they didn't go to the moon. Otherwise, they wouldn't be faking it, right? And it also proves that the limit is Earth orbit, because they can't even leave Earth orbit. And what a surprise. 50 years later, they still cannot leave Earth orbit. Isn't that interesting? So what we have here, I'm about to play, NASA's going to talk, and then there's going to be exactly a 4-second delay. Remember, a pretend 2 seconds out, halfway to the moon, a pretend 2 seconds back. Then you're going to hear the CIA whisper in Neil Armstrong's private channel earpiece, which on this unedited version we hear. Then you're going to hear crystal clear, no radio EQ, like, the astronauts in orbit or NASA, with a little muffled walkie-talkie type sound. No, this person is where the tape's being recorded. It's crystal clear. He's prompting them to say talk.
Call Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
Okay, Roger. You see that? They were waiting 4 seconds. Then said talk. See, if he answered right away, it would give away the fact that he's really close to the Earth, because there's supposed to be a 2-second radio delay going out, a 2-second delay coming back. So the CIA told them, do not answer until you hear us say talk. That's on the tape.
Call Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
You see that? They were waiting 4 seconds, then said talk. See, if he answered right away, it would give away the fact that he's really close to the Earth, because there's supposed to be a 2-second radio delay going out, a 2-second delay coming back. So the CIA told them, do not answer until you hear us say talk. That's on the tape.
Call Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Okay, so that's supposed to be the Earth floating in space. Now let's take a look at it over here. Right? And let's take a look at it. Okay, so to the right is 130,000 miles out, according to NASA and Neil Armstrong, right? That's the Earth over there on the right. But wait a minute, it's not.
If you've worn bad work boots on the job, you know the pain of finally yanking them off at the end of the day. Blisters, sore feet, next thing you know, you're on the couch for the rest of the day. Yes, I've been there. And then I found today's sponsor, Brunt. And man, I will never go back. Right out of the box, these Marin work boots were comfortable. No painful break-in period, no limping around for a week hoping they soften up, just straight up comfort from day one. That's my favorite part about these boots. And I'm not talking about kinda comfortable for work boots. I mean actually comfortable. Brunt's Marin work boot checks every box. It's lightweight, waterproof, slip and oil resistant, heat resistant, and even electrical hazard rated. Basically, whatever the job throws at you, these boots can handle it. And the best part, it doesn't hurt. I can't stress that enough. And if you're thinking, yeah, but will they actually hold up? Brunt's got over 500,000 workers backing them up. Plus, they let you try them on the job risk-free. You can send them back if you don't like them. That's how confident they are. So if you're tired of boots that destroy your feet more than the job itself, do yourself a favor and check out Brunt Workwear. Your feet will thank you. Brunt didn't just make a durable work boot. They reinvented comfort for the hardest workers out there. And for a limited time, our listeners get $10 off at Brunt by using the code Danny at checkout. Just head to bruntworkwear.com and use the code Danny, D-A-N-N-Y, and you're all set. Even better, Brunt lets you try all their products on the job risk-free. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them, and please support the show and tell them I sent you. Brunt's website's linked below. Now back to the show.
It's the window. They're using a 1 foot diameter circular photograph of the Earth, putting it on top of the circular window. And now here they are breaking down the shot, the photograph, in order to get ready for an interior showing the astronauts. You know what I mean? So there they are. There's proof right there that it's a fake shot. Here's even an outtake here when an astronaut's arm gets in front of the window. Look at this. Oh my goodness. So if that's really the Earth floating in space, that must be the arm of God going right in front of it. Oh my goodness. So this is the smoking gun. This is them faking being halfway to the moon. Okay? There they are getting ready, and there they open the iris, and there's Michael Collins, and there's the very bright Earth out the window. Want to look at that one more time? In fact, let's just make that big screen. Oh, it's really not the Earth floating in space. It's really a special effect with the circular window. Now, when I saw this, I said to myself, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon, just like Bill Casing said. I called him up. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. They really didn't go to the moon. I have them faking being halfway to the moon. Right? They're only faking being halfway because they couldn't go halfway. Do you understand that? Which proves they didn't go to the moon. If they're faking being halfway to the moon, it's because they can't go halfway to the moon, which means they didn't go to the moon. And what a surprise. 50 years later, the same thing. They cannot leave Earth orbit 50 years later. And Bill's like, well, I told you so, but I still wanted to believe that they went. Now, it's not because I love science or because I, wanted America to be great, although I do want America to be great. It's that I didn't want humanity to be so deplorable, despicable, that we would stoop so low to such a thing. Now, even my critics of this film admit that this is fake footage of Apollo 11 pretending to be halfway to the moon. They admit it. So the critics say, well, they were just rehearsing for an upcoming telecast. Really? Then if the mission cost about $1 million a minute, right? And every ounce, is precious because of all the fuel necessary to lift them off the ground, why would they bring an elaborate model of the Earth when the real one was right outside the window? So if they were really halfway to the moon, and they were really rehearsing, they would just rehearse with the real Earth out the window rather than creating a fake model of it. I mean, it's unbelievable. They make an excuse for them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. They still make an excuse for it. It just amazes me how they keep making excuses no matter what evidence there is. I even talked with a college professor of an aerospace department, and he said, I asked him, what if one of the Apollo astronauts confessed on national TV that we didn't go to the moon? You know what he said? He said, I'd still believe anyway.
Okay. So the idea is they pulled the camera all the way back into the back of the space capsule they were in. And there was a little round window at the far end, and it was supposed to they turned all the lights off inside, and they opened up the aperture so that it would look like the blackness inside of the cabin they were in was outer space.
Well, actually, they closed the aperture, but
Closed the aperture, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. Right. They didn't want it to be exposed for the inside of the spaceship, so they only
Correct.
wanted to be exposed for the outside. Because like right now, if we shine a camera out the window, exposed for the inside, the outside would be blown out and completely
right. So they
white.
closed the aperture to darken the walls of the spacecraft. They talked about turning out all the lights, blocking the windows, all of which they talk about because they thought these conversations would be edited out. For the part that they broadcast, again, this is on the homepage of Sibrel.com, they said there's only one window that faces the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera. Because if that were really the Earth floating in space, the lens would have to be right against that circular window. But in fact, it's at the back of the spacecraft with the lights off, and you can see they're using a very clever special effect. Had I only saw the first few seconds that they broadcast to the public, I doubt if I would have figured it out. That's why it says do not show to the public at the beginning of the reel.
Where did you get that reel?
Well, someone at NASA gave it to us. According to Bill Casing, a whistleblower at NASA gave it to us. And that's what convinced me. That's what convinced two NBC News directors.
So a whistleblower at NASA gave it to Bill Casing?
Well, they sent it to me. And what was on the label and on the tape were completely different things. When you pop it in, it says do not show to the public. All the footage from NASA was pre-edited. In fact, there's only like maybe 15 pictures of an astronaut on the surface of the alleged moon in the first mission.
Sorry, go ahead.
And there's 0 pictures of Neil Armstrong,
Right.
first man to walk on the moon. He didn't want his picture taken, right? And there's no unedited footage. Everything was pre-edited except this. This is up to an hour of them doing that special effects shot over and over again. The lights come up, and they're using, as you just saw, a 1-foot model of the Earth to pretend that the Earth is floating in space, to pretend that they're halfway to the moon.
So you're saying they used a transparency that they taped to the window or something?
Yeah, they also insert a little crescent piece of black material into the window to make it look like the Terminator line between night and day.
Is there any evidence of that transparency thing, though?
Well, you just saw them fiddling around with the window. On the right-hand side, if you want to cue it back up again, Steve, he says for the part that was broadcast, this is Neil Armstrong calling in from 130,000 miles out, meaning that little Earth with the black around it is supposed to be the Earth floating in space. He just said it was. He lied. We put them side by side, the lights come up, and it's a 1-foot model of the Earth. They just got caught faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. It's dated 2 days into the flight. They can't walk on the moon the next day when they're still in Earth orbit 2 days into the flight, you see? And what a surprise. 50 years later, they still cannot leave Earth orbit. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon, because of the radiation. That's another clip we'll show of a NASA engineer saying the technology necessary to go to the moon has not been invented yet. And so this is what convinced me. This is the key, the highlight of the film. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. It's on the homepage of Sibrel.com. That's what convinced me. This film took 7 years to produce. I spent 4,000 hours editing 45 minutes. And I was doing it under the theory it might be true that they faked it. When I saw this, I'm like, they faked it. I showed it to the director of NBC News. He said they faked it. He was going to broadcast it nationwide until he was told by the federal government not to do it.
That clip certainly is pretty obvious that they were trying to pull off a camera trick, especially when they turn on lights inside the cabin. But some of your critics say that there is footage, and I've seen footage online of Apollo 10 where the camera goes from one window showing the moon and pans over to the other window opposite showing the Earth. And there's also additional footage from Apollo 11 where it shows footage of the Earth a little bit closer than that, I think, where it shows it moving in and out of the window frame because the camera's moving around, not still.
Well, actually, on this unedited footage, as they're faking the shot, they say this is the way 10 did it, meaning Apollo 10 that allegedly orbited the moon faked the same shot the same way from Earth orbit. So actually, that footage is incriminating. Here it is on the right. That's them. He just said it's 130,000 miles out. It's the same proportion on the left, right? On the right, the part that was broadcast to the public, they claim that's the Earth floating in space from 130,000 miles out.
Right.
Over here on the left is the unedited version that we have, where they say Apollo 10, which allegedly orbited the moon, and it never did. They faked it the same way. So if you went to a restaurant, let's say the restaurant
I'm with you on this.
Okay.
I'm completely with you on this.
But my point is this, though, about these defenses of it, right? I think I mentioned in the video, I talked to a college professor.
Yes.
Okay?
Right.
He said there's nothing I could show him that would make him recant the glorious moon landings. I said, well, what if an Apollo astronaut confessed on national TV it was fake? The professor said he'd still think that they walked on the moon anyway. There's no piece of evidence these people who made a religion out of the moon landings will ever admit to it.
Sure.
Now, if we went to a restaurant that had a salad bar and one of the multiple ingredients had poison in it, would that be enough to shut down the restaurant? Or would you have to have 10 of the ingredients poisoned, or half of them, or 75%?
Right.
The point is, if any of the mission is fake, then all of it's fake. Now, if you want to go to the next picture, Steve, pull up that still picture called Shadows. Okay, we just proved logically.
Can we talk about that other footage, though, from Apollo 11? Where there's shots of the window where it shows the Earth moving around and it looks legitimate.
Well, you can show it if you want, if you have it queued up.
I don't know if we have it queued up. Well, what do you make of that?
Well, the one that I saw was them filming a reflection of the fake shot in a piece of glass on the other side of the spacecraft. Do you follow that? Which made it look like it was going from one end to the other. Do you follow? So they're faking the Earth shot here. They have a reflection of it in another window, and somehow they use that as an illusion to make it look real. We can prove, again, we proved logically without having to look at any video or any footage.
Stephen, right? I sent you the clip earlier. I texted it to you.
Well, yeah, here is the picture called Shadows, if you want to see it. That's the same fake shot right there. Because a cloud band can't go all the way across the Earth. Do a close-up. See, all
was
of
it
these...
9 minutes and something? 9 minutes, 15 seconds, Steve, remember? Right here. That looks...
Yeah, that's a reflection.
See, he pulls out. All right, you can pause it. That looks pretty legit.
Yeah, I think that's a reflection of the other window behind them. So the fake shot is in the glass that's behind them. Again, we only have to prove that they faked one shot to prove that the missions are fake. Because if they really went to the moon, there would be no reason to fake it. I just showed them faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit.
So how do they have, when it stops, it shows blackness. If they were in low Earth orbit, wouldn't you see the entire Earth moving with clouds moving?
Depends on whether they were in sync with the Earth or not. That's why the photographer David Percy believes that is a transparency of the Earth over the window.
On that shot.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, go back to my footage. We have them clearly faking being halfway to the moon.
I agree with the other shot.
Regardless of this, this could be in a TV studio, for all we know. What we do have is them faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. I just did a side-by-side where we showed them claiming that's the Earth in space, and on the left, I showed that it was a 1-foot model. Period. It's over. We have the crew of Apollo 11 faking being halfway to the moon, which means they could not even go halfway. It doesn't matter what other footage that they claim is real. We only need to show poison in one of the ingredients in the salad bar to close down the restaurant. We have them faking being halfway to the moon with a 1-foot model of the Earth. We just showed it. On the right is Neil Armstrong line, 130,000 miles out. It's the little blue Earth.
Right.
On the left, it's the window being made up to look like they're halfway to the moon. They're faking being halfway to the moon. It means they couldn't go halfway, which means they didn't go to the moon. I mean, come on. When Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927, right, 50 years later, 1977, aircraft was 1,000 times more advanced. There were millions of them flying across the Atlantic. So in comparison, if today they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon, what's that the equivalent of is saying after he flew across the Atlantic in 1927, 50 years later in 1977, no aircraft anywhere on Earth from any country can fly across the Atlantic, and the best aircraft can only fly 3 miles, and that's it. 1,000th the distance. You see, after they blew up the first atomic bomb in 1945, 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful.
Right.
So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, we would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now. There'd be bases all over the moon.
So one of the pushes, the counter arguments to that would be that atomic bombs and airplanes are tied to the economy and the military industrial complex for global dominance militarily, and airplane for commercial travel, money. All the biggest innovations in the world are tied to the economy, right? And going to the moon, I don't know how the going to the moon would benefit the economy or our military.
Well, that's kind of the lame excuse people put up, like it's money. Well, every month for the last 40 years, the federal government spent 70% more than it took in. So I don't think money is an issue. And then ever since Nixon, 8 presidents have said they're going to return to the moon in 5 years. You had Reagan say it. We're going to return to the moon in 5 years. You had Clinton say it twice. You had George Bush Sr. say it once. You had George Bush Jr. say it twice. You had Obama say, we're going to return to the moon in 5 years. You had Trump say we're going to return to the moon in 5 years.
Yeah, Trump did say it, didn't he?
So they've said they want to return to the moon 8 times in 5 years. And somehow, with 50 years better technology, they can't do it in 50 years. But somehow they did it in 8 years with 1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone when space travel had only just begun. You see that? You cannot have greater technology in the past and in the future. Let's look at the next picture. Pull up that still. If you want to look at, like you said, the most condemning evidence, bring up the shadow one. We just showed them faking being halfway to the moon, right? That other guy's footage may look more real. It doesn't matter. So we have them faking being halfway to the moon. We just showed it right in front of your eyes. The lights come up. It's a 1-foot model of the Earth, which means they're faking being halfway to the moon, which means they can't go halfway, which means they didn't go. Over on the left, you can prove the moon landing fraud with one simple photograph. You can make that full screen if you want. These are the way shadows should appear outside. Go ahead and make that image larger if you can, Steve.
Steve, on the top left, there you go.
Okay, so this is a picture I took in sunlight. You can do this yourself. Go outside in your front yard, your parking lot at lunchtime at work on a cloudless day. Look at 2 trees, 2 telephone poles, 2 people. The sun is 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth in volume, 93 million miles away. It's going to cast shadows in the same direction over the entire Earth or moon. It's scientifically and mathematically impossible for shadows lit by sunlight to intersect. They always run parallel. Over on the right is the alleged last mission to the moon, where an astronaut shadow is going at 12 o'clock and a rock only 5 feet away. The shadow is going at 9 o'clock.
Well, the shadow from the bigger rock is even more interesting.
Well, the point is that shadows should be parallel in sunlight. NASA claimed all the pictures are taken in sunlight because it's 20 times brighter with no atmosphere on the moon than the Earth. The last thing they're going to need is electrical light. And yet that is absolute proof in a court of law, scientifically, mathematically. Shadows are intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. It means it's an electrical light that's really close. So you just proved the moon landing fraud.
And you have a cinematography background.
I do. I've won best cinematography in the first film I ever made, and best editing and best director in the first 3 films I ever made. And that was 40 years ago.
Wow.
Okay? any filmmaker will tell you that that is lit with electrical light, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. And you think
electrical light, meaning what you're saying is it's an artificial light source that is much closer than 90 million miles away.
Right. If according to NASA, because there's no atmosphere on the moon, it's 20 times brighter than a desert at noon on Earth. So the last thing in the world you're going to need is a flash photography or electrical light. But that proves on the right, it's a very close electrical light or maybe two electrical lights. You can't have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart in sunlight. It's impossible.
Do you know if did they film this in like an airplane hangar?
According to the Eyewitness that we have, it was filmed at Cannon Air Force Base, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968.
Oh, I thought Bill Casing said it was shot at Area 51.
Well, he died before this confession came forward. That was the assumption. I assumed that too. But we have, so let's go through the proofs. First of all, today they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon with 5 decades better technology than in 1969. You can't have 1,000 times greater technology in the past and in the future. We just proved that they faked it. Everything else, there's never been a technological milestone, flying across the Atlantic, splitting the atom, cold fusion, whatever you want to do. There's never been a technological breakthrough that no one could repeat 50 years later, when in fact it should be 1,000 times greater 50 years later. We just proved it. You can't have 1,000 times greater technology in the past and in the future. They faked it. Then we have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. That's an electrical light. We just proved it again that they didn't go to the moon. We showed it a moment ago. On the right, the little blue Earth, they claimed it's halfway to the moon. On the left, lights come up. It's a 1-foot model. We proved it a third time. And then we have an eyewitness. Right? If I said I saw you commit the murder, I'd say that's pretty condemning evidence. And if I said it as I was dying, a court considers that twice as powerful. If you want to show the picture, Cyrus Eugene Akers, please, Steve.
Yeah, hang on. I want to stay on this for a second.
Okay.
What is the pushback you get for the shadows? What is their explanation?
I've never heard pushback on it.
Steve, what do you think about the shadows? Steve has a background in cinematography.
Oh, you're going to drag me into this.
Okay.
Steve, can you...
I am a cinematographer. I'm a commercial cinematographer. I've not won any awards. I've just won a lot of money. I would say that it is... Well, you know what? I actually did some test shots. I didn't show Danny this. But because it's a single source here, and this is a single source, or at least this is supposed to be a single source, right? It could be two sources. You have one and one here. It's easy enough to test. And so I took a photo, and this is the sun directly behind me, and you can see, this shadow is going straight up like that, and this one is kind of at an angle. And then over here, you got kind of the same thing going on.
Well, that one, you and the pole are kind of going the same direction, right?
Yeah, and what camera did you take that with? Was it your cell phone or what?
So this is my personal camera. Why is this? It's not freaking working, man.
Yeah, I mean, what camera did you take the picture with?
It's not switching?
It's not switching. It's a... Oh, it's frozen.
Oh, it's frozen? Oh, no.
Oh, shoot the whole
CIA. Yeah, the CIA.
Yeah, what you need to do, Steve...
they're hacking into the mainframe.
Is show us a picture you took in sunlight from objects 5 feet apart that intersect at 90 degrees. Then I'll say the moon missions are real. Because the one on the left is parallel shadows as it should be, and the one on the right is intersecting shadows because it's an electrical light that's really close.
Right.
It also has to do with the type of camera you use. So if you use a cell phone, that's a wide-angle lens, and that may distort the angle of the shadows.
The cell phones have they all have three different lengths now.
What they used was a 50-millimeter lens that was somewhat telephoto.
Okay.
And so...
All right, full screen this, Steve, so we can see it.
All right, so...
What kind of lens was this?
This is... So, because they had a Hasselblad, and I just looked online to kind of... I'm not trying to debunk it, but I was trying to match the lens. And so, yes, they have a 50-millimeter, but then there was one resource said that there was like a 25 to 80. And so the equivalent for my camera would be an 8-millimeter. I don't have an 8, I have a 12. And so this is not going to be as wide, right? So this is like this is one shot right here.
This is a 12 millimeter?
This is a 12 millimeter.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so these objects are...
Well, this is way wider than 50.
Yeah, so these objects...
But on my camera, because I have a cropped sensor, the equivalent is the same. And so
Okay,
here,
so this is a great example as to why the moon missions are fake.
Mm-hmm.
You taking the picture and the person standing where the rock should be. If shadows intersect in sunlight, then that woman, it looks like
Would
a
be
woman.
going that way.
Yeah, it would be going straight across your shadow, but it doesn't. You see what I'm saying? So what you're actually proving is that they faked the moon landing, because you cannot have 90-degree shadows intersecting from the person taking the picture, which is the astronaut shadow, the person on the right, which is the shadow of the rock, which is going straight across your head, in the other picture, right? So, and then what you need to do is go replicate shadows intersecting at 90 degrees with 1 or 2 electrical lights.
Do you have any other photos?
I did that. I have a bunch of flashes, and so I did the same thing. So you can see like the shadows here. So which one's fake, right?
Well, that one's at nighttime, isn't
This
it?
is at night, but so it looks a lot more like a moon landing shot, right? So you can see like the angles are exactly the same. This is real sun, and this is fake light right behind
Right,
me.
but you still haven't showed them intersecting at 90 degrees in sunlight.
Well, so to put a second source there, I threw a flash. So I removed my source and put one at 90 degrees to push the shadow here. And when you combine them,
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So
Well,
basically,
That's what you have in the moon photo, basically.
Right. So you use two light sources to do those shadows, correct?
correct.
Okay, so that
well, there's
means-
a problem here
so-
because you have 2 shadows. This rock is casting
Yeah,
2
but
shadows.
Oh, it's casting 2 shadows
Yeah,
from the
but-
first light and the second light.
Right, but the shadows that we're talking about, the 90-degree difference, this picture was taken with 2 light sources. Well,
Correct.
NASA claims they were taken with 1 light source, the sun.
Steve, if we were on a film set, could we flag off that second shadow behind the trash can?
Dude, you were reading my mind. Holy crap! So I did flag it off.
Oh,
I took a shot with my cell phone to show the behind the scenes, but I forgot to upload it. But this is what it would happen if you put this. So this is a 4x4 floppy over here onto the right. So to eliminate that shadow that I'm casting, that double shadow, and you can see that there's a difference in contrast. For the technology that they had back in the 60s, they didn't have like a lot of extra cool stuff. It was pretty basic, like flags.
they had flags and stuff.
They had flags, but-
diffusers, and
Yeah, the diffusion was probably like a silk or maybe even like was tough spun, like an insulation, but they didn't have like half grid and full grid magic
Okay, so
cloth.
basically what you did to match the picture that NASA claims was taken in sunlight on the moon is to use 2 electrical lights.
Correct.
So you just proved that the picture that they claimed was in sunlight was actually taken with 2 electrical lights, which means they're on Earth, which is what I've been saying for many years.
Basically, to get these 2 shadows intersecting in the way they are, one going straight, one going to the left, you cannot reproduce that with one single light source.
Not with the sunlight. Yeah, they claim it was sunlight, and so this was done with 2 electrical lights, which is exactly how they took the picture, if you want to bring it back up. So here, this is taken with 2 electrical lights to have them intersecting at 90 degrees.
Right.
Now bring up my picture of them intersecting at 90 degrees.
Show the moon rock with the astronaut in the foreground.
So there you go. It also was taken with 2 electrical lights.
The big rock on the top right is crazy. It's literally a complete 90-degree angle.
So we just proved that the picture on the right was taken with 2 electrical lights, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon.
Would you agree with that, Steve?
I don't. My problem with that is you don't have a flag shadow over here with the. You would either have like a.
You would have a double shadow.
You would have a double shadow, yeah, or you'd have that flag line, and that's the only like for the technology that they had. I just can't see that being done. Like, look at this one versus that. You can see a difference in contrast. I would be interested to know what the film crews were using in order to produce this effect. Absolutely.
Yeah, but what you would say is that it's not taken with sunlight, the picture on the right.
I don't know. I think it's a really wide lens. The thing is, with a wide lens, you
Well,
get
I mean,
into,
if you had to say yes or no and your life depended on it.
If I had a gun to my head, I would say no. I would say it was sunlight.
Is the picture on the right taken with sunlight?
There's a 2024 study that links caffeine to higher anxiety risk. Half of North Americans are sensitive to it, and 40 million Americans are diagnosed with anxiety. Coffee's jitters fuel anxiety, yet it's the most used drug in the world. Over the last few years, I've started to drink less and less coffee, and now I probably drink less coffee than I've ever drinking. I probably drink 1 cup in the morning, maybe 2 on a rough day, but I feel better and I perform better on podcasts when my brain is not overstimulated on caffeine. Then I heard Andrew Huberman on his podcast talking about theobromine found in chocolate that gives you a subtler, longer lasting energy without the anxiety and improving blood flow and getting more oxygen and fuel to the brain and the muscles. That led me to Morning Being by Verso, a brew of theobromine and all the good things in chocolate along with antioxidants and electrolytes for all day energy, hydration, and focus. Plus other coffee alternatives taste horrible, and Morning Being tastes delicious right out of the box. On top of increased energy, Morning Being's ingredients have been shown to reduce stress, enhance mood, and balance blood sugar. Cocoa powders, drinks, and products are commonly contaminated with high levels of toxic heavy metals, but Verso conducts third-party testing on every batch to ensure they have pure, high-quality cocoa, prioritizing safety, and high flavanol. Since I started to replace my morning cup of coffee with Morning Being, I feel like I'm in a far better mood. My energy lasts longer, it's more focused, and there's no crash. And I also love how I get my daily dose of superfoods from it. So if you're looking to replace your coffee or your second cup, give Morning Being by Verso a try. Click the link in the description or head on over to ver.so/Danny and use the coupon code Danny to save 15% on your first order. That's code DANNY to save 15% on your first order. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
You're asking if my life depended on it?
Yeah, would you say the picture on the right was taken with sunlight?
I mean, sure.
You would? I don't think I would.
Well, I've shot thousands of
Here's the
setups,
problem.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to say it.
Right.
Because that would mean the moon missions are fake, and that has an emotional attachment to it. If a college professor teaching aerospace says an Apollo astronaut confessing it was fake would not dissuade him from believing the moon missions are real, then we can understand, no offense, Steve, you have an emotional attachment to the moon landings wanting to be fake. Because we've just proven, you proved yourself, that in order to get the shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart, you needed 2 electrical lights, which means that picture was taken with 2 electrical lights because that's the way it should look. On the left, very similar to your picture in sunlight. And yet you have this reluctance to say the moon missions are fake for, various emotional reasons, pride in science, who knows what. I had the same problem too. I had shadows intersecting, the weird behavior of the astronauts. I saw that picture also, the one on the right. But before I found the footage of them faking being halfway to the moon, and I still would not admit that the moon landings were fake. You see that? I had the same problem that he did. I didn't want the world to be that fallen. Just like Glenn Beck. He says, I know it has gotten bad, but at least we went to the moon. Now let's show a picture of Cyrus Eugene Akers, okay? So I believe that we have 4 times the proof to prove it in a court of law that the moon missions are fake. You cannot have 1,000 times greater technology in the past and in the future. Never happened in the history of the world, period. We have shadows intersecting
Except
at
for the Great Pyramids.
Well, no, not really. Those are just rocks piled on top of one another. Because now skyscrapers are 3 times taller with 1/10 of a footprint. So technology
But
has
the variation in
increased.
how square they are is not even close.
Well, I don't know about that. The point is you can build a building that's taller with less of a footprint. 3 times taller with 1/10 of a footprint. So yeah, architecture did improve.
You don't think the pyramids were made by aliens?
No, I think aliens is a lie because von Braun, who said they were going to fake an alien invasion, he said that right before he died. So, and this is from the guy who faked the moon landing. We can go into that a little bit later. But,
Okay.
But
What do you got? What is this, Steve?
Oh, I was trying to find the
Another photo of shadows?
No, it's like I was trying to find like a more higher resolution of this. Like, because
gotcha.
I mean it's cropped, and so what else is there?
Did you get this from like a secret archive or something, or is that available online?
It's an Apollo 17 picture.
Apollo 17. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so we've got Shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, which cannot happen in sunlight, which means it's an electrical light. We just proved it. We duplicated it with 2 electrical lights, meaning it was taken with 2 electrical lights, which means they're on Earth, not the moon. You can't have 1,000 times greater technology in the past and in the future. It's never happened in the history of the world where a technological breakthrough cannot be repeated 50 years later when it should be even 1,000 times greater 50 years later. Then we just showed the footage. On the right, them claiming it's the Earth floating in space. On the left, the lights come up. It's a 1-foot model of the Earth. That proves it. Then we have an eyewitness, okay? Cyrus Eugene Akers. If you want to show his picture, it's one of those pictures in the email.
Okay.
He said, as he was dying, fearing the judgment of God, and as best as we can tell from the ancient texts, if you confess your sin and repent of them, you're forgiven, even of murder. And that's what he said. First thing he said is, I want to get off my chest, I committed a murder in 1968. The son was there, and we're going to show a clip of that next. The son was there saying, Dad, who did you kill? He says, I killed a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base. The son immediately calls the military police in to investigate. He wants to give the victim's family closure. Did they just say the guy disappeared? Did he die in an accident? What happened? The military police come in. We're going to see the testimony of him eyewitnessing that. And they said, who did you kill? And he said who? He said when? July, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. On this one there, cue it up to...
Oh, yeah, I watched this one.
Cue this one up to 3:36 and play it through 7:28 in just a second. So 3:36 is where we'll start. So Cyrus Eugene Akers, he confessed...
This is his son?
That's his son. He confessed that he killed a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base. He was chief of security over the Air Force's most secure Air Force base. Bill Kaysing said the fake moon landing was supervised by the United States Air Force. Every branch of the military has its special ops division. The Army has it, the Marines have it, and the Air Force has it, and it's at that guy's Air Force Base, Cannon Air Force Base, Clovis, New Mexico. He said he killed a coworker. The military police came in to investigate, and when they said, why did you kill him? He said to cover up the moon landing fraud, because we both eyewitnessed them filming it on a fake set June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968, and my coworker thought it was morally wrong, and I killed him to cover it up. If you start this clip at 3:36 and play it through 7:28, you're going to hear the son's testimony, who eyewitnessed the deathbed confession and the investigation. Go ahead.
I've never known my dad to lie. To get caught lying was worse than whatever it was you did to begin with. I remember going to school with long sleeve shirts on to hide the purple welts. You did not lie in our house, that's for sure. Dad had a real...
Oh. Buggy today, are we?
Yeah, I guess Musk is having a problem with Starlink.
The CIA. The CIA knew
really
were coming
bad
in.
attitude towards lying. Excuse me again. Okay, anyway, this is the story that my dad told me on his deathbed. Project Slam Dunk was the name of this. President Johnson in 1968, okay? In Cannon Air Force Base in 1968, he said by the time he got there, that there was already 2 large hangars that were connected. There was hundreds of dump trucks that came in and dumped sand and stone, and cement powder was powdered over the top of all that to make it look like a lunar landscape. They had men that fashioned it into a lunar landscape, he said. Okay, I've never known my dad to lie, so this all took me by surprise. What's that all about? So anyway, he said that in front of the airplane hangars was pole framing with large canvas tents that was concealing the inside of the staging area. Inside the staging area, on flatbed trucks, was uncrated the lunar lander that was reassembled back inside the hangars. All of the walls were painted flat black, and the ceilings as well. He was sworn to secrecy by the NSA, and they would put him in prison for breaking that oath. And when Dad saw the moon landing on TV, he cried. He said he knew that what he had witnessed on TV was exactly what they recorded in that hangar. There was no reason for them to go flying around and everything. They had detailed high-definition photos of the landing area. There was no reason for them to go flying around to a different landing area that almost exhausted their fuel, except for drama, because everything had gone so smoothly. Nothing, so it had to be something. Anyway, Dad was one of 3 guards that guarded the inside of the front entrance. There was a list of 15 people who could enter. No one else was allowed by order of President Johnson. And here is that list, and I gave it to Bart Sibrel as well. And he checked out a lot of these names, and he says he can verify a lot of these people and what they do. And I come across a couple myself. Anyway, President Johnson, Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, Wernher von Braun, Robert Emenegger, Gene Kranz, James Webb, Joe Kerwin, Dr. Thomas Paine, Glenn Looney, Dr. Christopher Kraft, Dr. James Van Allen, General Trudeau, Lieutenant Colonel Donald Simon, and Grant Norrie. Now, the only 2 that I really have information on is Robert Emenegger. Apparently, he did a lot of video work and stuff for the Department of Defense.
So basically what he's saying is his dad was a security guard during the filming of the videos that we see for them on the surface of the moon.
Correct. Bill Casing said it was supervised by the United States Air Force. The most secretive Air Force base is actually Cannon Air Force Base, and his father was the chief of security there. And as he was dying, he confessed to killing somebody to keep secret the fact that they filmed the first, quote, moon landing a year earlier at Cannon Air Force Base, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. President Johnson showed up the first day of filming. According to his own minutes, he was 1 hour flight away on holiday. And he got curious and showed up. He personally gave Cyrus Eugene Akers this list of 15 VIPs. And these people, some of whom have admitted in their memoirs, were there. Cannon Air Force Base used to say on their website that President Johnson visited in 1968, and they rehearsed part of the lunar landing there. And then they scrubbed that off of their website when we got a hold of this information. After I secured this information, my book, Moon Man, again, it's in audio, Kindle, or print at Sibrel.com. I was verifying this. It took me 15 years to write the book, 2 years to edit the book.
When did you publish it?
I published it in, I think, 2021. And I'm verifying this information with him. And a couple of days later, while he's out, even though he had security cameras and a security system with the password, someone disabled it, took everything there was related to his father from his house. 2 days later, 2 guys showed up, government agents, and threatened to kill him and his family if they ever spoke to me again about the moon landing fraud. The White House at the time actually investigated this. The press secretary did. So did a senator on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate and the local FBI. This was about, 3 or 4 years ago. People were being threatened to be killed because of this coming out. If UFOs were real, they wouldn't be any disclosure in Congress. They want us to believe in them. You see, Stephen Greer's number one source that UFOs are real are the Apollo astronauts. You see, the lying Apollo astronauts who said their whole life the moon missions are real and aliens are real. So aliens are just as real as the moon landings. And if Stephen Greer, who believes the moon landings are real, can't discern that they are fake, then maybe what he has to say about aliens is an incorrect discernment as well. So the fact is, only one person has come forward that the moon landings were fake. And to say as you're dying, you killed somebody to cover it up. And the guy is verified to have been the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. And Bill Casing, I have on tape saying it was filmed at an Air Force base. All the pieces are coming together. So we have an eyewitness. We have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees that should be parallel. We have them using a 1-foot model to pretend that they're halfway to the moon, that even an NBC news director agrees they didn't go to the moon. And the fact that today they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon, even with 50 years better technology. And then if you want to show the next clip, we show one of the reasons. You asked for the evidence. There's just a couple of more evidences as to why they did indeed fake the moon landing. We have an engineer from NASA saying what most people don't know. If you want to show this still picture, Steve, it's called radiation belts down there.
Is this the Gus Grissom guy?
No, that's
Okay.
that's another matter which we can get into as
Okay.
to why. It's the radiation belts picture. It's on the most recent
The
email.
Van Allen.
Yeah, it's the most recent
Van
email I
Allen was
sent
also
you.
one of the guys on set that day.
Yeah, he was. So if
It was named after him?
well, the Van Allen radiation belts were named after. So go to Moon Technology Not Invented Yet. Okay, so basically, people don't know, but surrounding the Earth. If you want to pause it there, we'll go, and if you can show that picture, if you can find it there in the 6 attachments radiation belt. Most people don't know this, but high above the Earth, starting at about 1,000 miles up, is a radiation field that's
Yes.
30,000 miles thick, called the Van Allen radiation belt. You'd have to go through it to reach the moon, and you have to
Right.
go through it on the way back as well. Every space mission has been well below the radiation, generally about 750 miles below the radiation, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through it. You see, here's a NASA engineer saying that the radiation is dangerous, meaning lethal to people. And then he says, we must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space, meaning the technology necessary to go through the radiation and survive has not been invented yet. Go ahead and play the clip. Oh, there's an image, if you want to show it, of the radiation belt. You see, every manned mission has been below it, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through it.
There's been no astronauts that have been anywhere near that.
No, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through it to the moon and through it on the way back. And the clip we're about to see is NASA's own engineer saying the technology necessary to go to the moon and back through the radiation has not been invented yet. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space, meaning the challenges of radiation protection have not been invented yet. Go ahead and play the clip.
Smith, and I work on navigation and guidance for Orion. We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We won't have astronauts inside. We won't have astronauts inside. We won't have astronauts inside.
So there you go. Now you know why there's mannequins orbiting the moon. Somehow, with 1960s technology, with 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone, we can drive cars and play golf on the moon. But 55 years better technology, we can only have mannequins orbit the moon. The guy just said we must solve these radiation challenges before we send people through this region of space, meaning the technology to go through the radiation and back has not been invented yet.
So the Van Allen radiation belts are like big donuts that go around around like the equator of the moon. They go pretty high and they go pretty low, but there's holes in the top and bottom, right? Some people speculate that the Apollo missions could have slingshotted, they took off from Florida and could have slingshotted themselves around a little bit north or a little bit south and gone like through the top or through the bottom of it.
Well, I love the people who say that because
that's
they're
beautiful.
admitting that the radiation belts are deadly, which they are. According to NASA's own flight log, they went straight through the radiation belt at the equator.
Oh, really?
They didn't have enough fuel to zigzag, and the only way to go through them would be to launch from the North or South Pole. But seeing how the space shuttle launched at 38 degrees and blew up, launching at the North or South Pole would be too cold, plus wouldn't have the capability of the personnel surviving there. So according to their own press release,
They didn't have enough fuel to go all the way around to the north or the south.
Not at all. They didn't have the ability to do that, and they never claimed to have done that.
And also another interesting thing is to get through that radiation belt, they would have had to have a lot of protection around that capsule they were in, right? They would have had to have lead maybe or
about 3 feet of water is the latest idea.
Okay.
This is why, I mean, they said in 2014.
So sorry to interrupt, but they've sent animals through there, right, to test it?
That I don't know. They have covered up some information about that. What they did do is send 2 Geiger counters into the radiation around the time of this guy's report.
They exploded.
Well, almost. I called up NASA and I said, hey, first let me talk to this guy. They said, well, he misspoke. We don't allow him to talk to reporters anymore. And then I said, well, you sent up probes directly into the radiation belt and back with 2 Geiger counters. Can I please have those Geiger counter readings? They said, I cannot have them. It's a military secret. So the temperature of the sun isn't a military secret. It's just nature. And when they sent probes to Jupiter to find out how much, let's say helium is in the atmosphere, it's not a military secret. Why would the amount of radiation surrounding the Earth be a military secret?
Look at this.
Because it proves that they cannot go to the moon.
Yes, animals have been sent through the Van Allen radiation belts. Laika, a dog, was the first animal in space aboard Sputnik 2, but her mission was intended for 10 days and she only survived for 2 days due to the spacecraft overheating. However, no animals were specifically sent to evaluate the effects of radiation on biological organisms before sending astronauts through the Van Allen radiation belts. Instead, NASA designed the Apollo missions to minimize exposure by sending aircraft through the narrowest part of the belts at the poles and ensuring the trajectories avoided the densest regions of the belts.
Well, that's them contradicting themselves.
It's contradicting the NASA flight logs, you're saying.
Because that's why they launch at Florida, to be near the equator. And they claim they use gravitational effect to simply loop around. There was no additional fuel to zigzag through the belts. Their own printouts that they gave to the press corps show them going right through the belts.
This would be an interesting experiment.
That's why the guy said the technology to go through them hasn't been invented yet. Look at the next article. Go to this article here. It says, article says modern technology cannot go to the moon. It talks about the radiation right here. What's keeping us from Mars? If you want to bring up that link, okay? So I'll read it here. You can enlarge it if you want.
Published in 2009, does that say?
Yeah. It says, cosmic rays are so dangerous and so poorly understood that people are unlikely to get to Mars or even back to the moon until better ways are found to protect astronauts, experts said Monday. So right now, today, with 55 years better technology, they do not have the technology to protect astronauts from radiation.
Zoom in a little bit, Steve, so I can read that a little bit better. Down below that, I'll just punch in so I can see the whole line. One of the big issues is that they have really cut funding for biology issues.
You want the first part. Right after Washington. Cosmic rays are so dangerous and so poorly understood that people are unlikely
to go to Mars,
to get to Mars, or even back to the moon until better ways are found to protect astronauts from the radiation. So they're saying right there, the technology does not exist today to send astronauts to the moon.
Right.
You see? It's right there out in the open.
What does Elon say about this?
Well, Elon said the Apollo projects are a technological and historical anomaly. meaning they're out of place. In fact, if you want to look at another clip, he says that it's going to take 8 fuel trips in order to go to the moon. Look at von Braun, the guy who said we were going to go to the moon. If you want to go down to Wernher von Braun, multiple fuel trips needed.
Let's take a pause real quick. I got to take a leak real quick.
Okay.
Okay, we were just talking about, before we took our break, we're back. We're talking about Elon was saying that he would need 9 fuel stops to get to the moon.
Correct. First, he said it's a historical and technological anomaly, meaning out of place according to a logical progression of technology. And then he said with a taller rocket than the Saturn V, he's going to take at least minimum 8 fuel trips to go to the moon. And
Can you find out where he said that, Steve?
Well, yeah, and then we're actually going to show a NASA scientist saying it may take even more than that.
Okay.
So first of all, let's listen to this clip. So basically, Kelly Smith misspoke, got in trouble. He said the technology to go through the radiation has not been invented yet. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. They claim they looped around the equator through the belts. They're trying to make up for it now. So there it is right there.
Go to the headline. What does the headline say?
Yeah.
Elon Musk says it could take 8 Starship launches to fuel up a single moon trip.
And this is with a rocket that's slightly taller than the Saturn V. He's going to say it's going to take 8 of them. If you want to
zoom in, Steve, real quick. I also want to read the first part of this. Delivering astronauts to the moon is no easy feat, and it requires a disgusting amount of rocket fuel to pull it off. With its fuel tanks filled to the brim, NASA's Saturn V rockets weighed in 6.5 million pounds. During the Apollo missions almost half a century ago, it managed to burn up to 20 tons of rocket fuel every second. Fast forward several decades, and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk is trying to achieve similar greatness with the space company Starship rocket. This time, it's going to take a lot of refueling to get there. In fact, SpaceX competitor Blue Origin recently griped that SpaceX might need as many as 16 launches to get to the moon. Holy crap.
Right. So von Braun, and this is in my book, Moon Man, at my website, he said originally to go to the moon and one rocket is impossible. We're going to show a clip of that in just a second. And the minimum you could do would be 3 rockets, each weighing 800,000 tons, being taller than the Empire State Building. The Saturn V only weighed 2,500 tons instead of 800,000 tons times 3. So that's a difference of 32,000% times 3. Take a look at this clip. Just like Kelly Smith misspoke and accidentally told the truth, the technology to go to the moon through the radiation belts has not been invented yet. Here's an astronaut saying the best we can do with 50 years better technology is orbit the Earth, and we hope to go to the moon eventually. We'll take a listen.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Yeah, he just said they hope to go to the moon eventually. Now take a look at this clip from von Braun himself saying the largest rocket that you can build can only achieve Earth orbit, and that's exactly what Elon Musk said. It's going to take 8 trips. Take a listen.
Here to reveal a plan for a trip around the moon is the chief of the guided missile development at the United States Army's Redstone Arsenal, Dr. Wernher von Braun.
A voyage around the moon must be made in 2 phases. A rocket ship taking off from the Earth's surface will use almost all the fuel it can carry just to attain a speed great enough to balance the pull of gravity. Unpowered, it will then keep circling the Earth in an orbit outside of the atmosphere. This is the first phase. However, if we can refuel the ship in this orbit with fuel brought up by cargo rocket ships, it can set out on the second phase, the trip around the moon and back.
So each one of those 9 rockets Elon's talking about would have to be full of fuel
in order to have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit and go to the moon.
But so just to make sure I'm following, the first one would be able to get with full of fuel, would be able to get into orbit.
That's it.
The next one would have to go, I'm assuming would be be able to go the same distance, fuel the one up in orbit.
At least 8. At least 8 trips of fuel.
So after it fuels it up again, I guess they can hit the blasters and go even farther. But then you have to send another one up twice as far to fuel it up again, right?
Well, then you need fuel to land on the moon and to leave the moon,
right.
which they didn't have. This is why NASA destroyed all the technology. It's one of the clips at Sibrel.com, a NASA engineer saying, we intentionally destroyed all of the moon landing technology. Now, if you were ever going to destroy a technology, you might do that with the atomic bomb, right? We used it to end the war, but let's not do that again.
Sure.
And yet just 10 years later, atomic bombs are 1,000 times more powerful. You see, so if they really went to the moon, the last thing they would do would be to destroy all the technology.
Right.
They destroyed the technology. They destroyed the telemetry data where the rocket really was. They destroyed all of the original videotapes, which you would never do if you really went, but that's exactly what you would do if you were faking it. So that's actually incidental proof that they faked it as well. Now look at this.
And who specifically said that it was all destroyed?
That's a clip. If you want to go to Sibrel.com, Moonman video links, look for the one NASA admits they destroyed the technology. His name is Don Pettit.
And how much did it cost to put the...
In today's dollars, $250 billion.
$250 billion.
Yeah, so you can imagine, would Bill Gates spend $250 billion making the first AI? Hey, that worked great, and then throw the schematics, the blueprints, and the hardware in the furnace. You would never do that, but that's what they did with the moon technology because you could prove, like we're proving now, it didn't have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit, doesn't have the radiation protection, it can't have the lunar module combat 250 degrees outside with air conditioning on a bunch of car batteries. It didn't even have enough fuel to leave the lunar surface. It was only 2 aluminum foil thickness in the spacecraft. Would you even get into a spacecraft that was the thickness of 2 pieces of aluminum foil where your elbow or your knee or your finger
I thought it was an eighth of an inch.
No, that's the shielding on the spacecraft, but they're talking about the lunar module itself. You're talking about the command module. The lunar module itself was only the thickness of 2 pieces of aluminum foil. Would anyone even get into that? Now, this clip below, it says NASA engineer, multiple fuel trips needed. Start that at 28:55. This just came out. Okay. NASA, it's the one in the last email I sent you. It says modern NASA engineer, multiple fuel trips needed. At 28:55. Go ahead and take a listen for 1 full minute.
Okay. Really interesting. And then I started trying to understand the architecture to get there. Okay? I did not understand until this week when I really thought I was going to embarrass myself in front of you guys and then decided to further embarrass myself in front of you guys. I didn't realize that in order to get the human lander to the moon, we have to launch a bunch of additional rockets to tank up in low Earth orbit. I didn't know that. And I'm like, well, how many rockets do we have to do that with? And they're like, 6. And then I start, because I know people, I start calling people. I was like, dude, really, how many rockets is it? They're like, well, boil off. And okay, so I was like, some people were like, well, it's looking like 8. I was like, 8 rockets? We have to fire 8 rockets to fire 1 rocket to the moon? And then they're like, I mean, that's what they're saying, but it's probably more like 12. Really? And then I was like, I'm an engineer. I know how to do this stuff. So I started to account for like nominal schedule slip and boil off. And this is how many rockets it's going to take to fill up that thing to get it to the moon.
So you can pause there.
If you had any questions.
So he said he did the math. It's going to take up to 24 rockets taller than the Saturn V to go to the moon. You see that? This is why they destroyed all the schematics, the blueprints, and everything in the attempt to cover up the fact that it's technologically impossible to go to the moon with the Saturn V rocket, which he just proved. That you saw the Saturn V was smaller than Elon Musk's rocket, and it's going to take 24 rockets taller than the Saturn V to have enough fuel to go to the moon. Are we convinced yet that they fake going to the moon? Now, here's another interesting clip. I think you saw it in Astronauts Gone Wild if you want to cue up Hot Mike of my assassination. So basically...
So this is Buzz Aldrin when you go to his house?
No, this is Edgar Mitchell.
Edgar Mitchell.
Right. So the very first thing we started this conversation with, although you can show that if you want.
When he punches you. Buzz Aldrin is the one who punches you, right?
Right.
Okay.
Basically, you said the behavior of the astronauts at their press conference was off. It took, the window shot of them faking being halfway to the moon to convince me. Here's the famous, incident where I'm asking him to swear on the Bible, and he punches me. Now, if I walked on the moon, it would be just like what you said, Danny. If I walked on the moon and someone thought otherwise, I would find that hysterically funny, right? I would be like, sure, I'll swear on the Bible. Would 2 Bibles make you feel better? What about 3? But it's like me walking up to him in front of his wife and saying, oh, your mistress says hello. You see, a sword with no point causes no injury. The fact that he's getting angry is only because I'm right.
Right.
So after we made the first film, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. There's Neil Armstrong refusing to swear on the Bible that he walked on the moon. I came up with this idea of tracking down the astronauts. I showed Edgar Mitchell the footage of them faking being halfway to the moon. He turned beet red. He said, where did you get this? He kicks me in the butt from behind on the way out.
Right here.
This is it right here. And in the commotion, we left a high-quality wireless microphone on him. And in the commotion, my camera guy forgot to hit stop record. So if you want to fast forward this to 48:59, while the camera is in the back seat of the rental car, we're accidentally still recording the audio of the astronaut and his son in their house with the door closed.
Right.
And starting at 48:59.
You're good. Right there. You're a little bit before that, Steve.
Yeah, just turn up the audio from here.
You ever get a gun to shoot them at them before they get out of the office?
We have a video camera running if you want to do it.
Right.
That would be great footage for us. See you later. In court, I hope.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
So do you want to call the CIA and have them whacked? Okay, you can stop there. That's a little director's art film about me being chased by the CIA. But basically...
How long after they walked you out to the driveway did they say that?
That was them closing the door and on the inside of their house. I didn't find that until the transcript was done.
Rewind, watch that again, Steve, from the point they're arguing. Rewind it. Right there, yeah, play it from there.
Hey,
so that's him right there, and that's his son behind him.
People, but
right.
You're going to be on the deck unless you get...
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
And get the hell out of the black house. You ever get a gun to shoot them at them before they get out of the office?
We have a video camera running if you want to do it.
So they're both right there outside.
That would be great footage for us. See you later. In court, I hope.
In court.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
So that sounds like they're inside, though.
Yeah, they are. As soon as I said that remark, they were on their way back in their house and closed the door.
Okay.
That's why you hear the echo sound of the inside of the house. I mentioned court because he threatened to take me to court, and I'm like, please do.
What did you do with that?
Well, I didn't find the recording until like 3 months later. Wow. We had a film secretary who did a transcript of all of this. Mind you, we have a millionaire backing us. So about 3 months after I did all these interviews, she calls me up frantically on the telephone. Bart, do you know what they're talking about privately in their house with the door closed before you found out you left your $800 microphone and you turned to go get it? I'm like, I don't know. What are they saying? They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty funny. It says, no, Bart. They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. And I'm
what was Edgar's response to that?
Well, I don't know. But the point is, if they really walked on the moon, right? And I'm some silly person who thinks it was filmed at Cannon Air Force Base, why would the CIA care? Right.
So I'm curious to give it context. Because I'm sure did he stop recording right after he got the question, or was there more audio after that?
Well, there was more audio after that, but that's the relevant part.
But I think it'd be really interesting or relevant also to hear what Edgar said to that. Like if he was joking with him, or if he was like, if he had like or maybe he didn't say anything, or maybe he was like, yeah, I think we should call.
Yeah, I don't remember anything relevant. Otherwise, I would have put it in there. The fact is, we left that microphone on him accidentally because I was assaulted, and I, in the confusion, forgot to get it. And my camera operator would normally hit stop.
Yeah.
He was so, a shock that I was assaulted. He forgot to hit stop record. So,
well, I would I understand that part. I'm just saying it would be super relevant to leave in what his response was to his son. is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think there was a response. Otherwise, I would have left it in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we might have been out of range as we were driving away. You know, it's a radio wave. It only works within, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of a mile or something.
Right.
But in any case, that's the part that stood out to me. If I'm some silly person who thinks the moon landings were faked and filmed at Cannon Air Force Base, why would the CIA care? You see, why does an astronaut who's on a civilian mission have the CIA in his Rolodex? And why would the CIA be involved in killing me if they really went to the moon? You see? So that's incidental proof they didn't go. So is destroying all the original videotapes, technology, telemetry data, which they would never do if they really went. But that's exactly what they would do if they were covering up a fraud. You see? So there's plenty of proof that we didn't go to the moon. The problem is people have this religious attachment to it. They don't want to admit that America has gone that far down the drain. The fact is there's no independent press coverage, and people wanted to believe it. And if the guys in the command center don't know the difference between a practice flight and a, quote, real one, no one else could possibly know as well.
So I want to ask you about this rich billionaire, millionaire rocket scientist guy who funded your movie. How did you meet him?
Well, it's very interesting if you believe in serendipity or divine intervention. You remember I told you that I originally got scared. You know, the shadows intersecting, the weird behavior of the astronauts, the Soviets had 5 times more man hours in space than we did, and they never went.
Right.
Never went to this day. And I'm like, something doesn't smell right. And I have this relentless, never give up personality, and I love puzzles. And I thought, well, if anyone could figure out whether we didn't go to the moon or not, it would be me. And so I turned down the project, and then I later changed my mind when I realized that the faking of the moon mission is more profound than if they had actually gone. And so it was kind of a stage experience. And so as soon as I changed my mind 5 years later, again, after reading the Bible 5 times from cover to cover, ask any of my friends. I wasn't a Christian, smoking pot, sleeping around or whatever, but it did show me there is a battle between good and evil. Come on, surely murder is wrong and pedophilia is wrong and stealing is wrong. And so lies precede crime. You see, conspiracy is half of all crimes are conspiracies. Either they're done in the emotion of the moment or they're plotted out in advance, right? The government plotted this out in advance. So as soon as I changed my mind and literally was willing to risk my life for the truth to come out, serendipity, divine intervention, a day or so later, I meet a multimillionaire who works as an aerospace company building rockets for NASA, who knows the moon missions are fake, who decided to give me $1 million to expose it. And like I said, I was producing the film under the theory it might be true that they faked it. I figured we'll never know. We'll never have any concrete proof whether they went or not. I was wrong. When I popped in that tape that said, don't show to the public, and the CIA is telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay, and they're claiming it's the Earth from 130,000 miles out, and it ends up being a 1-foot window, I'm like, they really did fake it. So this guy wants to remain anonymous, I guess so his stock doesn't go down or something. And it just shows you that when you're in pursuit of the truth and what is right, God, the universe, backs you up on it.
How certain are you, guy? This isn't. How certain are you that this guy who funded you wasn't some sort of foreign op?
Well, I've known him for 20 years or more. He's like most people.
When you first met him and accepted the money, I mean, like you would see how Russia or China would have the incentive to fund you to make a movie exposing how.
No, they don't want it exposed. Like we talked about before, they're better off blackmailing the United States. I could have a picture of a world leader with a prostitute and bring them down by uploading that picture to the internet. Or the smarter thing would be to blackmail them year after year. They don't want the truth to come out. Otherwise, Fox News would have exposed it, and RT would have exposed it that the smartest AI, Putin was there. Putin was there Go to Sibrel.com, see the clip.
Yeah.
He's shown that the AI shows the moon missions as being fake, doesn't look surprised, looks scared that the truth might come out.
So you're certain this guy works for NASA as a rocket?
Well, he worked for a company that build rockets for NASA.
A private contractor.
A private space company
Okay.
that builds rockets for NASA. Don't want to give too much away. Who knows that the moon missions are fake.
Is he still involved in this stuff?
No comment on that, but basically, he's absolutely genuine. I mean, when you know somebody for 20 years,
What does he think about UFOs?
He thinks they're demonic. I also wrote a book called...
All of them are demonic?
Well, according to the top two UFO researchers, Jacques Vallée and Alan Hynek, UFOs are real, but they're not from outer space. They're from Earth.
But that doesn't mean they're demons, right?
Well, those two people also concluded the third point, which is that they're demonic. I just wrote a book, just came out, called Aliens from Planet X, that talks about a coming alien deception by the federal government. They're leaking out all of this stuff to give it street cred, to make it look like it's real. But the fact is, von Braun's closest friend said that they were planning on faking an alien invasion.
Yeah.
This is coming from the guy who faked the last greatest historical event, the moon landing. So all this stuff of all these people coming out saying UFOs are real, when they're pinned down on it, did you personally see a UFO? Did you personally see an alien? No, but my friends in the military told me so. I mean, they want us to believe in it. Why aren't there congressional hearings about JFK or the moon landing fraud? But there are about UFOs because they want us to believe in them, which means they're not true. This is my new book at Sibrel.com. I read it in audio, Kindle, or print. It's 10, 20 years of research about this, and it's based on the experts' opinion. It's their opinion, not mine, that UFOs are terrestrial and that there will be a fake alien invasion perpetrated by the corrupt federal government, who also faked the moon landing.
Okay. Interesting. So you're not willing to say whether this guy's still involved in any of this rocketry stuff or NASA or SpaceX or anything like that?
Well, I don't want to give away
Right.
too much about his identity.
Okay.
The saddest thing, though, if I may bring up a question we sidestepped earlier, you brought up the Apollo 1 fire, okay? Now, when I made this movie, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, given $1 million to do it and Astronauts Gone Wild. I had sources who asked me not to release information until after they died. This is why the book is
Talking
so...
about Gus Grissom?
Correct.
Right.
This is why the book is so different, that, you know, and it's interactive with 17 links. I interviewed the widow of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon, Virgil Grissom. He was the most beloved of all the astronauts. I interviewed his widow for 4 hours. It's her opinion, not mine, with 100% certainty, that he was murdered by the CIA for not cooperating with fraud in the Apollo program. She told me so. She said on January 26, 1967, he came home from work and said this: "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today inspecting the equipment. I've been here 3 years," he said. "They've never been here before. Why did they show up today?" The very next day, he's dead from faulty equipment. Because a few days before this, he held a press conference without permission when he took a bunch of reporters up to the top of the rocket and affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit to the top of the Apollo rocket, calling it a piece of junk. He was preparing reports, according to his widow, to give to Congress and the Senate that the CIA confiscated from his house the day he died before they even informed his widow that he had died. He knew they were 10 years or more away from going to the moon. He would not participate in the fraud, and they killed him. So this is why the two of the three astronauts, act kind of bizarre and don't like giving interviews. This is why at their first and only press conference, they look like they're at the funeral of their mother instead of the winning locker room of the Super Bowl.
Right.
Because I believe if you threaten the life of test pilot Neil Armstrong, participate in this or we'll kill you, I don't think that meant a whole lot to a test pilot, right? But if you threaten his wife and his children, you see, and this is why it's so significant. You mentioned earlier the faking of the moon landing as if no one died because of it. But the fact is people did die. There are at least 4 other backup crews that were murdered. We know that Cyrus Eugene Akers killed 1 person. That's 5. And we know the crew of Apollo 1 was murdered by the CIA. That's 8. You see, if they had just faked the moon landing and never killed anybody, maybe the devious part of me might respect their ingenuity. You know, the team of robbers who go from, let's say, the dry cleaner into the vault next door at the bank, right? But you don't respect them if they slit the throat of 2 young guards with wives and children. And that's what they did. This is why it's so important for the truth to come out. And if the current administration really wants to unite both political parties against the corruption, they need to tell the truth about the moon landing fraud. Not only were they played for suckers 6 times, they murdered their brethren to cover it up. Not my opinion, opinion of the dead man's widow. So our country was founded before the Constitution on the Declaration of Independence, which says when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter it or abolish it. We have the right to reform the federal government. And what's the first one? Life. They murdered the crew of Apollo 1 because they wouldn't participate in the moon landing fraud. Our taxes, $250 billion. If you add up state, local, and federal taxes, that's more than half of our income, is used to finance fake moon landings and to pay the salaries of the CIA agents who murdered innocent men with wives and young children to cover it up. That's how bad it has become. We need to know. The faking of the moon landing is so much more profound than if they actually went. And that important truth is not going to come out unless somebody makes it happen. And without the truth coming out, those people are still at large and they are endangering everybody. You see, this is so profound. My film on the homepage of Sibrel.com opens up with the Tower of Babel. There's a famous writer who said about the Tower of Babel, the monument to their pride became a memorial to their folly. The Messiah said, if you start to build a tower and you don't finish it, you're proclaiming yourself a fool. You see, they never finished it. And then we show the Titanic, and they had the audacity to put in print the ship that God himself could not sink. You see that? Never made one voyage. The technology to reach the heavens, you see, never made it. And then Nixon, when he knew they weren't there, said putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe. You see, there's a spiritual message here that they faked the moon landing by the most powerful nation on earth that claims to be this bastion of truth and justice, and they're a bunch of hypocrites who murder their own people and deceive their own people. And the fact that people are defending it, you see, because it's a sweet, pleasant lie, that makes it all the more insidious and all the more important for the truth to come out.
What do you think the strongest evidence is on the other side for it actually happening?
Well, they claim, like I said, the Russians would have blown the whistle, but that's not true. We know they're being blackmailed by them. You can't keep a secret from hundreds of thousands of people when you can, because the atomic bomb involved 129,500
Sure.
and only 8 people. And according to the flight director who I spoke to, someone in the command center can't tell a difference, right, between a simulation and actual flight. So that doesn't fly. Then they say there are reflectors on the moon. The fact is we have a 1959 and 1958 article from Scientific American on my website that shows they were bouncing lasers off the moon because it's highly reflective. And by the time a laser gets to the moon, it's over 5 square miles. So they could simply choose reflective areas as the landing sites, and then Russia put a reflector on there that was an unmanned probe. Come on, the smartest AI in the world, not available to the public,
Right.
multiple AIs hooked up together, were just shown pictures through its deep fake detector program that has never been wrong from unmanned Chinese probes of the lunar surface that said they're absolutely real, and every Apollo picture it was shown said it had a fake backdrop. It was taken inside a television studio. It's that simple. They didn't go to the moon whether people want to accept it or not.
I don't know why I'm just thinking about this, but isn't there a guy who's like living in Russia or living overseas right now that was a part of the Apollo, or that exposed some part of NASA's database that like proved that the moon landing wasn't real?
I haven't heard of that one.
Steve, remember this guy we're talking about the other day?
Yeah, a Russian guy who...
I don't know if he was Russian, but he was part of NASA. He leaked something from NASA that proved that the moon landing was fake, and he basically left the U.S. because what he did was he leaked like confidential stuff that NASA had. Remember this? You don't remember this guy?
I don't remember.
Wow.
Well, we have Cyrus Eugene Akers saying he eyewitnessed the moon landing fraud at Cannon Air Force Base and murdered somebody to cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
We have the footage that says don't show to the public with a third track of audio of the CIA.
No, this was a younger gentleman who was more, he wasn't actually alive during the Apollo missions, but he, I guess, was working for NASA and then found something and then illegally leaked it.
Before this interview today, I was rereading an email I got from someone who works on the Artemis project and whose father works on the Orion project. They both said the moon missions are fake, and they're working on Orion and Artemis. They said it's fake. They sent the Orion spacecraft into the atmosphere, and they said it would have killed the crew had there been people inside of it. You see, coming from the moon, you'd have to go faster than just coming in from Earth orbit. Almost doubles the temperature. And they said they don't have the technology to protect people from reentry from the moon. They just said that. Then how did they do it in 1969 in the first attempt?
Also, one of the big things is that the temperature, which is crazy, the temperature in the light of the moon is 250 degrees Fahrenheit.
Approximately. And
then the temperature in the shadow, which could be 50 feet away, can be negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, or more. Yes.
Or more.
It's about a 500-degree difference.
That's crazy.
So they claim that they were able to get that heat of 250 degrees in the lunar module down to 72 degrees with air conditioning from a bank of car batteries. So this is why they destroyed the schematics, because you could prove that's not possible.
So obviously they thought it made more sense to park the thing in the sunlight because it would be able to survive the heat better than it would be able to survive the cold.
Well, there's so many problems. Von Braun said in his book, A Voyage to the Moon, not only would it take 3 rockets that would be 32,000% bigger than the Saturn V to go to the moon, he said every 24 hours there would be a 50% chance of a catastrophic failure from micrometeorites, which are pelting the moon, tens of thousands of them every second. That you'd have to immediately go into a cave or an iron shelter to protect yourself. That never happened, you see.
Yeah, also, to me, it sounds like if they have batteries, I don't know exactly what kind of battery, I'm not a battery expert, but imagine if they have batteries and they have electronic components, they're microchips, whatever the hell they were using in that lunar lander, it would be better to have it in a colder environment than it would be to have batteries in a 250-degree environment.
Well, they both are bad.
They're both bad, but what one's less bad for like, transistors and microchips work better in colder environments?
Well, you asked what Elon Musk thinks. Okay, Elon Musk said it's a technological anomaly, putting a man on the moon with 1 million the computing power of a cell phone. He says today you'll have to use 8 rockets minimum, and the NASA guy said up to 24. He also indirectly said the moon missions are fake because it took him 5 attempts with 600 million times the computing power of the lunar module to land a rocket vertically. Do you understand how difficult that is?
Yeah.
To land a rocket vertically with 6 rockets all around the side of the main rocket underneath with 600 million times the computing power of the lunar lander. The first time he tried to land a rocket vertically, it blew up. Second time it blew up. Third time it blew up. Fourth time it blew up.
Right.
So how did they land the lunar lander 6 times flawlessly with 600 million to computing power? So there he's saying again, the fact is Elon Musk needs NASA's cooperation to launch anything over 100 feet, and he's not going to bite the hand that feeds him. So he's playing ball. Now maybe he'll stop playing ball because the Office of Government Efficiency, right? Pointing out fraud. Is there a greater fraud that the U.S. perpetrated than one that cost $250 billion
That's a good point, Bart.
to fake the moon landing? I spent
only convenient frauds, Bart.
Yeah. Well, they're afraid it might embarrass the United States for the truth to come out.
It would. Of course it would.
But only temporarily. You have to think long term. If we don't tell the truth about it, then the evil people have won, and we're complicit with it, and we're telling lies to our school children and to college students. The fact is, if you want to gain public trust, you can actually do so by admitting the moon landings are fake. And rather than the Republicans fighting the Democrats, if Trump forced an Apollo astronaut to tell the truth, you would have Democrats and Republicans saying, we didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, but Trump probably doesn't have a need to know on that. He probably doesn't have the access to that
I think he knows. Why do you think day one, right, January 21st, he insisted that the moon rock from the Oval Office be removed? Didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Is that true?
It's true.
He insisted the moon rock be removed.
Correct. Yep.
Find that, Steve.
Find it, Steve.
Speaking of moon rocks, what's the story of von Braun going to Antarctica?
Yeah, I mean, one of the clips on my website is the fact that after a curator in the Netherlands watched a funny thing happen on the way to the moon, in his museum late at night, he opened a hermetically sealed container with the moon rock. So Neil Armstrong said he personally picked up a particular rock, personally put it in his pocket, and personally gave it to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Pretty good chain of custody. They immediately put it in a hermetically sealed box, and a few years ago, they opened it up, put it under a microscope, and it's an out-of-this-world looking piece of petrified wood. NASA says no comment. No one asks if the moon rocks are fake. What about the moon missions? And yeah, 6 weeks before going to the moon for the first time, von Braun takes a leisurely vacation to Antarctica, where there are all sorts of lunar meteorites on the surface. So they either faked the meteorites and turned them into moon rocks. They created them in a ceramics lab, which they could do. The fact is that the current moon rocks that China has analyzed have about 100 times more water in them than the Apollo rocks, because the theory was that they would be bone dry. So there's an inconsistency. China's rocks show about 100 times the amount of water parts per million than the Apollo rocks. So what is that all about? You see, they kept pushing, revealing the truth into another administration, another generation, and now people are stuck with this truth. The smartest entity on Earth said the moon missions are fake because the pixels in the foreground and the pixels in the background don't line up. It indicates a fake backdrop.
Talking about the AI.
The AI. So the truth is coming out. That's why they came up with this film recently. We faked some of the images, but we really went to the moon. The fact is, back in 1969, 10% of the public back then thought that they were going to fake the moon landing. So if you really went, the last thing in the world you would do would be to fake any of it.
Right, unless the radiation was going to damage all your film and your cameras, and you're like, we went, but we don't have any proof, so we got to have backup footage.
Well, they didn't have a problem with that, because during the alleged live landing, they just showed an Atari graphic. Why not have a camera on the side of the rocket and have it on 24/7 all the way from the Earth all the way down to the moon? They showed a simulation Atari little graphic during the landing. They didn't have a problem not having enough footage. And the fact is, we have a tape dated 2 days into the flight that shows the crew of Apollo 11 still in Earth orbit 2 days into the flight, faking being halfway to the moon.
Another interesting thing, how many cameras did they bring out to the moon when they went onto the surface of the moon?
Well, still cameras, they only brought one, which seemed kind of weird. And this is the alleged reason. I went to NASA's archives, which is literally a bank vault. And I said, the most famous NASA mission.
This must have been before you released any of this stuff, because now I bet you they got a restraining order against your ass.
So they went inside, and I said, the most famous mission, Apollo 11, first man on the moon. Can you show me a picture of Neil Armstrong, standing on the surface? There's 0 pictures.
Still photos.
Correct. This is why he doesn't give interviews unless the president asks him to. One of the last clips, if you want to find it, at a funny thing happened on the way to the moon on the homepage of Sibrel.com.
25 anniversary. 25
That's right.
years.
On the 25th anniversary, holding back tears, He said maybe someday, to a group of high school students touring through, you'll be able to remove one of truth's protective layers. So if I were going to the moon for the very first time and there's micrometeorites and radiation and 500-degree difference between light and shadow, I'd have a camera on both astronauts. But
Yeah.
he didn't want his picture taken. He didn't want to give any interviews. And the same with Michael Collins.
That's one of the craziest things about this. You are like a superstar for humanity if you're the first human being to ever step foot on another planet, right? Like,
and he looks like
the
he's
fact
at
that
his
you don't do any interviews other than the press conference right after and the 25th year anniversary.
And at the press conference, he looks like he's at the funeral of his mother.
Yes.
You see, because he didn't want to lie. That's why he rarely gave any interviews. He didn't want to lie. And that's why on the 25th anniversary, if you want to cue it up toward the end of a funny thing happened on the way to the moon.
Yeah, pull up that 25th year anniversary.
He says, perhaps someday you'll be able to remove one of truth's protective layers.
Yep. Let's pull that up real quick. I also want to show you something. I got something I
Sure.
want to show you in the shelf.
Uh-oh.
Keep rolling.
At what timestamp?
Toward the very end, just kind of scan it. You'll see him standing at a podium toward the, keep going forward.
That's not it.
Forward. Right there. Right there. So right there. That's the part where you can show.
Back it up a little bit.
This was given to me by Brian Keating, who came on the podcast about a year ago. This is allegedly a piece of the moon.
Well, then he just violated federal law because you're not supposed to have a moon rock in your possession. And one of the things that's in my book is how a grandmother who had the tiniest fleck, or speck, of a alleged moon rock in this, solid plastic, wanted to sell it to help, pay her mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
And she was surrounded by the FBI and held in custody without being allowed to go to the bathroom because she had a speck of a moon rock, because it's a federal crime to be in possession of a moon rock. So either he violated the law, you're violating the law, or it's a fake moon rock.
Let's just go with fake. It's fake.
So here he is saying a cryptic remark to students going through the White House on the 25th anniversary.
Okay.
One of the first times he spoke in 25 years.
Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you, we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers.
He is.
What the hell?
That layer.
What does that even mean?
Well, if you analyze that speech, he's talking about this footage here that proves that they never left Earth orbit. That's supposed to be the Earth in space, but it's really a 1-foot model. And like I said, if any of it's fake, all of it's fake. If you look at the speech, it's the only part he had memorized and said looking up
He wasn't
straight.
reading it. Yeah. Remove one of truth's protective layers.
And he's sniffling, meaning he's about to cry. Maybe someday these students in the future will remove one of truth's protective layers about the moon landing fraud. There's a layer of truth surrounding the Apollo missions that's protecting the truth. You see, maybe future generations can remove one of truth's protective layers about the moon landing. You see? And that's unfortunately been my forte for the last several years, why I made the movie, why I wrote the book, and why I am continuing trying to get the truth to come out, because they sadly did fake the moon landing. And it's an important truth. If our country or the world ever wants to progress, it's like a cure for cancer. We can't cure our cancer unless we know it exists.
Another huge problem with it, if it was fraudulent and the whole thing was fake, if we do figure out how to get to the moon eventually, now you have to compound and cover up for the previous lie. Because now if we go to the moon again for real, right, and we show footage, we show photos, we show evidence of it, we have to make sure that corroborates everything that the fake thing we did back in 1969, make sure they both match up, right? We have to cover for that lie still.
Correct. Maybe that's why they're trying to skip it and go to Mars. But if they can't go to the moon, then how could they possibly go to Mars, you see?
Exactly.
Right. So what they'll probably do is just keep postponing it. They've postponed it 8 times, right? Do you realize NASA has never kept a schedule in their entire history, not a single time, except the most complicated mission of all time, that they were ahead of schedule. They said in 2014, we're going to have people orbiting the moon. In 2018, they were 2 years behind schedule, and they only had mannequins orbiting the moon. They'll just keep postponing it until there's economic collapse, civil war, or meteor strike, at which point no one's going to care who shot JFK or if they went to the moon or not.
When is the alleged next scheduled flight with astronauts to go at least orbit around the moon?
Well, that was scheduled 2 years ago.
Right, I remember
and it didn't
that.
happen. I got an email from someone saying, "What are you going to say, Bart, when they go to the moon, in 2 years?"
Mm-hmm.
And that was 2 years ago, and they never done. I said, "Look, they're going to postpone it. They always do. They always postpone it because they can't do it." I mean, the South Pole has 100-mile-per-hour winds.
This year, September.
Oh, with people, right? Or is it going to be unmanned?
The next scheduled moon mission is the Artemis 2 mission, which NASA now targets for September 2025. This mission will be the first crewed Artemis mission around the moon.
Okay, so I'll bet you pretty much anything.
I'll bet you this fake moon rock.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll do it for the moon rock.
Perfect.
Okay, so if they don't send people around the moon in September, I get that moon rock.
Deal.
Okay, I'm looking forward to this. Right.
We're going to come do a follow-up podcast.
Be sure to put that chain of custody correct.
Yes, I will.
Because you know what I'm going to do with it when I get it.
You're going to get raided by the FBI.
Yeah, you may get me there, Steve. So trust me, they will postpone it. They have 2 choices. They're going to fake it or postpone it.
Or maybe they could go through the top of the radiation belt.
Well, they can't. That's why they're launching from Florida. They'd have to launch from the North Pole or South Pole. That's what von Braun said.
Yeah.
To go around the radiation belt, you'd have to launch from the
Right.
North Pole or South Pole.
The biggest problem now is not just the radiation, it's the fuel.
You don't have fuel. You have to have a space station first to ferry the fuel up to. You have to protect them from radiation. And then once you land, you have to protect them from micrometeorites. You see, there's all sorts of problems. That's why the 2 people I spoke to who work on the Artemis and Orion project said they're there at NASA working on this. They said, absolutely, the moon missions are fake. I got emails from them. They work there.
What was the confusion during the press conference with Michael Collins talking about the stars? Because he was like, I think it was Buzz who said he didn't remember. Or was that Neil Armstrong who said he didn't remember? And then Michael Collins was like, I never saw stars.
Right. Well, the fact is, you should be able to see beautiful stars, more beautiful than you've ever seen before from the surface of the moon. But they couldn't fake the astrological position of the constellation. So they were told, don't talk about it. And when the people say, well, why aren't there any stars in the picture? They say, well, the aperture was closed for the bright surface, and that is why they don't show it.
That would make sense, right?
Not actually. They used to have on their website a picture of this space shuttle at sunrise, and it's pretty bright, and you still see the stars in the background.
Really?
Yeah, but you can't find that anymore. They took it off because it contradicts what they're saying. But the question is, why didn't they take any pictures of the stars by themselves? Why didn't they just point the camera up and open the aperture? Why did they take a car to the moon but not a telescope? Would you really drive miles away from your life support system, and if it breaks down, run out of oxygen before you could walk back? They can't fake the constellations. That's why they never took a telescope, you see. And if we were going to Paris, there'd be all these pictures of us with the Eiffel Tower behind us, right? According to the astronauts, the Earth was over the horizon the entire time. There's only one photograph of the Earth from the surface of the moon with an astronaut on it, and it's way high up, and it's smaller than a full moon from Earth, when according to their own testimony, it should have been over the horizon and 4 times bigger than a full moon. But they couldn't fake the turning of the Earth. They couldn't fake the cloud patterns, which would have to match, so they never talked about it. And in this particular clip, a reporter asked Neil Armstrong.
You're talking about a footage of the Earth from the moon.
Yeah, there's no picture of me posing with the Earth behind me.
No, there's no shot of an astronaut on the moon with the Earth in the background.
No, there's one of the flag allegedly taken on the last mission, and a tiny blue Earth in the sky. And of course, it's smaller than it would be, and it was supposed to be over the horizon. That's a reenactment. That's actually a composite, not a real picture.
That would be the actual size of the Earth, right, from the moon.
Yeah, it would be huge.
Yeah, it'd be
and
massive.
everyone would want their picture taken in front of it, right?
It'd be essentially 4 times bigger than the full moon looks from here.
Correct. But they couldn't fake the rotation of the Earth. They couldn't fake the cloud pattern that would match the weather, at the time. So they just didn't talk about it. And when a reporter asked Neil Armstrong about what was the stars like, was that incredibly beautiful? He says, I don't remember. And then Michael Collins, who wasn't supposed to have been walking on the moon with him, right? He was supposed to be orbiting while they walked. He says, to help him out, I don't remember seeing any. But he wasn't there. And if you get a printed transcript of
He
that...
was in the
command module.
The command module.
Allegedly. So he tried to cover for that mistake and remind him what they were told at their debriefing, which is you didn't see any, otherwise we'd have to show pictures of them, which we couldn't fake. So he says to help him out, I don't remember seeing any, except he wasn't there.
How long after the mission was that press conference?
That was about 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
They were allegedly quarantined for fear of moon germs, which everyone in the scientific community said there wouldn't be any. They would die. But that was their debriefing and preparing. And if you also look at the press conference, there's 2 teleprompters hidden in the desk to remind the only people on Earth what it was like to walk on the moon. When someone asked them what it was like, they're looking at a TV prompter to tell them what it was like to walk on the moon. And then if you get the written transcript of it, which was the only thing available for decades before YouTube, they say that Michael Collins' remark, who said, I don't remember seeing any, they say Buzz Aldrin said that because they knew he misspoke.
Right. Did you have any trouble publishing your book or ever getting any of this stuff out? Did you have any pushback from like book publishers or from video publishers or anything like this?
No, they can't really take down my YouTube channel because that would just prove that I was right. But for example, the punch footage, which was my footage, my tape, my camera guy.
The punch footage?
The punch, me being punched by Buzz Aldrin.
Oh, yeah.
The famous
yeah,
viral
of course.
video.
Right.
Okay. So I'm the guy who says we didn't go to the moon. And of course, they have to put a description underneath to reassure people that we really went.
Right.
I have about, I think, 70,000 subscribers. And that clip has been up on my channel for about 7 years, and it has less than 500,000 views. On another person's channel who has less than 200 subscribers, because he thinks we really went to the moon and is making fun of me, it got 2 million views in 30 days. You understand that?
Really?
200 subscribers, my video gets 2 million views in 30 days on his channel. That's $4,000 or more of ad revenue off of my clip because he says they went to the moon. I have 70,000 subscribers. It's been up for 7 years and has less than 500,000 views. So they're shadow banning it or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Now, when I found the footage of them faking being halfway to the moon, that day that I found it, which was June 30th, 1999, when I called up Bill Casing, super excited. Oh, we really didn't go to the moon. You're not going to believe this. He's like, well, Bart, I told you. I worked there for 6 years. I told you we didn't go. I'm like, no, you don't understand. They really did fake it. It's like, well, Bart, I told you. It took me so long to finally admit it. That phone call was interrupted with this screech so that I couldn't talk to him. And as you saw from the book in the chapter called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to CNN,
Right.
I was literally followed from church that night. They disabled my car as I pulled up alongside of someone following me to get a look at them. My car just died. A military source I have says they zapped it with what do you call it, EMP weapon or whatever. I'm literally being chased on foot by 3 other cars. I hire a cab to drive me with the secret footage to CNN, where I'm surrounded by government agents.
Atlanta, Georgia.
In Atlanta, Georgia. And they drug me to the point of vomiting with what I presume is truth serum. I escaped their custody. I made my way back to Nashville. And I told the NBC news director I got him because I peed in a cup. And I said, I'm going to prove I was illegally abducted and illegally drugged by the federal government. And so I gave it to a friend to put in a lab in his name. And after we met for lunch a few days later, I said, well, what are the lab results? I'm going to prove I was drugged by this exotic drug. He says, well, there was a problem at the lab. And I'm like, well, what problem? He says, well, they had a break-in over the weekend. And I'm like, well, so what? He says, well, funny thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample. And so they sent CIA agents actually into the lab over the weekend to remove my urine sample to prove that I had been drugged and interrogated with true serum when they wanted to know how many copies of the tape I had and all this kind of thing.
Why do you think they let you go? Why didn't they just whack you?
Well, I escaped. And you have to get my book. Like I said, I read it, Kindle or print. I go into great detail that's not in the movie, how 2 good guy government agents literally were sent to protect me. And
so you somehow ended up in a mental hospital.
That's right, because as they were illegally arresting me and drugging me, a lawyer from the back alley of CNN came out, and I saw his sign said lawyer. I'm like, hey, I'm being illegally arrested here. And he gets out his notepad, and the government agents are freaking out that now they have to deal with him. And so if a person is arrested, they have to go before...
Did they read you any rights or anything?
Well, if you're arrested, you have to go before a judge within 48 hours. You can never be charged again. Mm-hmm. You have the right to an attorney, right to a phone call, right to all these things. But if you're arrested for being crazy, and mind you, during the last 3-year little episode of You Know What, doctors were being arrested for being crazy in Europe for saying maybe something's awry here, maybe certain medicine isn't good for you, then you don't have any rights. And instead of being able to lock you up for 2 days, they can lock you up for 10 days. You don't have a right to a lawyer. You don't have a right to a phone call. And so that's what they tried to do. And in the process of this is when I escaped and where I met 2 government agents who were there to protect me. All of this is detailed. It would make a feature film of itself. In my chapter, a funny thing happened on the way to CNN and a funny thing happened on the way to church, where the day I found footage that proves, according to the NBC news director, that the moon missions were fake, I was abducted by government agents, given true serum to the point of vomiting. And if it weren't for a lawyer stepping out serendipitously during this illegal arrest, I may not be here today to tell you about this, and that good guy government agents were sent in to protect me. All of this is detailed in my book at Sibrel.com.
And these guys visited you in the mental hospital?
That's correct.
And they didn't tell you anything about where they were, who they were, where they were from?
They gave me a couple of clues because basically when I was first abducted, they probably were just going to kill me and throw me on some train track and claim the train killed me. But the lawyer
walked out.
But the lawyer walked out, so they took me and put me in a mental ward. I was told I was going to be there for 10 days. And this was a pretty modern, mental hospital or whatever in Atlanta. And so they had a courtesy phone. So I have all these numbers memorized in case of an emergency, how to dial long distance. So I'm calling the news director at NBC, the executive producer of the Moon film. And while I'm on the phone, I hear drilling on the other side of the wall. Zzz, they're literally trying to pull out this. CIA agents dressed as phone company guys. And then simultaneously, I get a tap on the shoulder saying you're being immediately transferred. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Mm-hmm. This nurse who I trusted, she said I was going to be here for 10 days. So I went to her and I said, who made this decision to transfer me immediately? She says, some new doctor. Today is his first day. So they sent in phone company guys to literally yank the wire out of the phone that I was using to call the executive producer, the news director of NBC. And they sent in someone posing as a doctor to have me transferred to a literal prison for the mentally insane. And it was during all of these adventures that 2 guys came in the middle of the night, and they said, Mr. Sibrel, we want to talk to you. And I'm like, I'm all ears. But they said, not in your room. A mental patient there had left an electronic device in my room. I pointed it out to the, one of the male nurses there. He removed it. And so they took me in the middle of the night, 1:30 in the morning, to, I think, the employee cafeteria. They were wearing hospital scrubs, like nurse scrubs, But the place was so modern, knowing there actually were hospital scrubs, they wore their street clothes. So they guessed wrong. You see, they weren't from that place, but they tried to look like they were, and they made a mistake on their wardrobe choices, right? And they were genuinely concerned for my well-being. They said things like, Mr. Sibrel, we're all rooting for you. You're doing good. Hang in there. And I'm thinking, that's kind of weird. And they asked me, what medicine did they have me on? And then I'm thinking, well, if you work here, wouldn't you know what medicine you have me on? They took my blood pressure. They were generally concerned for me. One of them had on a watch, and it said United States Marines. I think they were with what's called the MCIA, Marine Corps Intelligence Activity Department. They were sent in to protect me. I think there's literally good guys and bad guys doing an under-the-radar civil war. 3,000 architects and engineers say a pinhole airplane can't bring down a skyscraper. Just look at Oklahoma City bombing, half the building blown away, right? Somebody has access to direct energy weapons or explosives who are bad guys in the government. There are good guys in the government trying to counter them. There were bad guys who faked the moon landing, threatened my source and his family with death for telling me his father saw them fake the moon landing. And there were good guys who were sent in to protect them. Some from the FBI, some from the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. Same with me. I found proof that we didn't go to the moon. I'm getting advice from my church elders what to do. I'm literally followed from church. I get behind the guy following me, pull up alongside of him. I'm zapped. I'm literally being chased on foot. I hire a cab to drive me to Atlanta, where I'm surrounded by government agents who would have killed me until a lawyer walked out. So they put me in a place where I don't have legal rights to a lawyer, whatever. And then good guys, Marines, come in to make sure I'm doing okay. So as best as I can tell, there's a literal civil war going on. So the reason why I changed my mind, remember, I didn't want to make this movie for fear I could be endangering my life. That I realized, Danny, you see, I'm going to die anyway. And this is worth dying for. Our founding mothers and fathers, after 5 people were killed at the Boston Massacre, said that's enough. We're not going to put up with this anymore. Where are the people who are that loyal to what is right in the federal government? There needs to be a general amnesty to all the Apollo astronauts, whoever did 9/11, whoever did JFK. If you come forward and tell the truth, we will give you a pardon. We will protect you. We have to have a house cleaning. You can't have a house cleaning until you take out the trash. And the way you take out the trash about a lie is you tell the truth about it. And the most powerful tool that Trump can use to bring down the corruption is to show the American public that they were treated as suckers about the moon landing fraud. And he'll have both Bill Maher and Glenn Beck united and say, look, something's wrong here. And don't be afraid. The truth will make us free, which means lies keep us in slavery.
Yeah, it's just the idea of coming clean on the moon landing being fake. It doesn't seem like there's, I don't know. Maybe there's no upside to any of this stuff. Like Trump's been saying he's going to release the JFK files.
He said that last time and didn't do it, did he?
He said it last time. Yeah, he did. And when it comes to like the JFK files, I think the majority of Americans can paint the picture of what happened with the JFK thing. I mean, there's been enough documentaries and books and stuff written about the truth of what happened with JFK. There's not, I think it's the vast majority of people know that there was some sort of conspiracy there. It's not like that, which is with the moon, which is so crazy.
Well, the rebuke of the Tower of Babel was known to the world. The rebuke of the Titanic, that boasted to be the ship that God himself could not sink, was known to the world. But this has not been publicly known yet, I believe, so that when the truth comes out, it will be all the more shocking. You see, I'm not a rich man. I spent virtually all the money I had in the bank sending out copies of my book to everybody in the new administration, their deputy chiefs of staff, the CIA director, FBI director, everybody I could possibly think of. I don't vote. I don't get involved in that mess. I pray for all people, whether they're Republican or Democrat. I wish them all the best. Like I said, Trump, said he was going to tell the truth and didn't. He has one more chance. And I don't care whether he's Republican or Democrat. I'm praying for the truth to come out. It will be an eye-opening experience. See, I was in Berlin when the wall was up. I know what that's like. I helped somebody escape from the KGB when I was there. And when that wall came down, I couldn't believe it. Imagine right now, Danny, Steve's coming running in here. My wife's in here. You got to stop. You got to turn on the TV. And one of the Apollo astronauts is confessing, I'm sorry. We did film it at Cannon Air Force Base. We did kill people. I'm so sorry. The world would be dead silent. We would go, wow, has it gotten that bad? And it has. The only problem is this is a sweet lie. It's Santa Claus for adults. People need to love the truth. One of the quotes at the end of the first chapter says the bitterest truth is better than the sweetest lie. And then we have a quote from Mark Twain who says it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. And we have a quote from Carl Sagan, who I got an email, and the person said he's talking about the moon landing fraud in a politically correct way. He says, once people have been bamboozled enough, it's hard to convince them that they have been bamboozled. The lie has captured them. It's almost impossible to convince them that they have been lied to when they make a god out of it. And that's the moon landing fraud. But most people are open-minded. I think both Bill Maher and Glenn Beck would admit it. If it came out, if an Apollo astronaut said so, they'd say, wow, I guess I was wrong about that one.
Has there been, everyone's heard the conspiracy that Stanley Kubrick helped film the footage. Is there any hard evidence to him having any involvement in this at all?
Well, personally, I don't talk about it in my book or film. I think it's irrelevant. What's relevant is they did fake it. That's the most important thing. Now, if you want to speculate, because they faked it, they had to have someone in charge of the fake pictures. So they had two choices. They could hire the general of the media department of the Pentagon and get great security and amateur results, or they could hire the best filmmaker on the planet who, in the same year that the moon landing was filmed, 1968, was shooting a film about going to the moon. And if you made them look different, you see, then it would make the moon landing pictures look real. Later, Stanley Kubrick was given the most advanced film lens on the planet, manufactured by NASA, so that he could shoot by candlelight in Barry Lyndon. And then in the film The Shining, the little red rum boy has a hand-knit shirt, Apollo 11. And then his last film, remember? Eyes Wide Shut, seeing the wrinkles in the guy's spacesuit when there shouldn't be any wrinkles at all, and yet we don't see it. He insisted contractually that film open on the 30th anniversary of the launch to the moon.
Did he really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Eyes Wide Shut. He insisted it debut on July 16th, 1999 in the contract, and it came to fruition even after he was dead because it was in the contract. So either he knew or he had something to do with it. He also developed a fear of ever visiting the United States after that time as well. His daughter says, dear old dad wouldn't do such a thing. She says I was 8 years old at the time. Actually, she was 7. And what my parents did at a cocktail party after we went to bed, we have no idea, do we?
What do you think it would take for the public to wake up to this and be kicked in the teeth, for lack of a better word or lack of a better analogy, to take this stuff more seriously? Because you've been working on this for your whole life, right? You've been talking about this since you were in your teens, right? So Stelly's studying it, and you're the number one guy. You're like the father of this moon landing conspiracy, other than Bill Casing. He was like the grandfather of this, like this whole investigation. And it's you two that have been pushing this to the forefront forever. And there hasn't really been any other evidence provided by anybody who has come out as like a quote unquote whistleblower or anything. But have you put, like, how much thought have you put into like what would actually get somebody in the government to, like somebody like Elon, for example, to push this forward, to get people in maybe Congress to take this more seriously?
Well, The reason why, in my opinion, people were willing to die in 1772, I think was the year of the Boston Massacre, where they said that's it, and not now, is that no one believes in God anymore like they used to, which is really a fundamental belief in right and wrong. And even if there is no God, do we want to be historically remembered as the cowardly? You know, there's a long list of sins that it says in the last chapter or second to last chapter of Revelation that if we continue, living this ungodly way, we won't inherit eternal life. And the very first one is the cowardly. Think about that. During this little event from the last 3 years, millions of people took a medicine for an illness they didn't even have. Why did they do that? For fear of death. And the scriptures say that what you fear will come upon you. Do you see that? And so people aren't willing to die for what is right, but we're going to die anyway. That's what I realized. You might as well, if I'm going to die anyway, wouldn't it be better to die for a just cause and be remembered for that? And there is a titanic struggle between right and wrong. And that quote about the Tower of Babel, the monument to their pride became a memorial of their folly, that could be said about the moon landing. We can trust the government again if we tell the truth about the worst thing that the government has done. That actually will restore trust. That will actually unite both political parties against corruption when they are shown that the moon landings are fake. All they have to do is prod an astronaut to come forward, or just release the CIA files, or have, the president declare it and have congressional investigation. People, the evil people will run for the shadows if the truth about the moon landing fraud comes out. There's no better tool than to end corruption than to disclose that they faked the moon landing. Start with the worst of the worst. Start with the most shocking. And then people can start trusting the government again, but not until then.
Do you think, I know Rogan was trying to get somebody to debate you. Do you think that'll ever happen?
I think the guy who you said gave him the moon rock, what's his name?
Keating?
He's the guy who wanted me to debate him.
Really?
Yeah. So Rogan sends me an email, hey, I want you to debate this guy, Keating or whatever. I haven't heard from him ever since, He took me out to dinner like in, 2001 when the film first came out. He heard about it. And he's like, what can I do? I know we didn't go to the moon. What can I do? And when I did that exhausting 3-hour interview, yours is less exhausting.
With Rogan?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he has a huge audience, and he has to be accountable, and he has to sort of play the middle ground.
Yeah,
there.
well, he told me on the break, there's a reason why I'm doing it this way. Trust me. There's a new generation of people who
completely get it.
And I didn't think he was right, but now I do. Now I realize I think he was right, because I get emails from people saying, the Rogan interview is what convinced me.
Right.
And I didn't see what he was doing. I'm confused. It's like, why are you acting like, you believe they're real for 3 hours? But he's very strategic.
Yeah.
And he's older and wiser than me. And so it ended up being the right way to do it. And at some point, you have to commit to the right side. I don't think when he had Robert Malone on there for 3 hours, he took the pharmaceutical company side for 3 hours. I don't think so. We have to take a side eventually. We've heard their side for 55 years. We know what their side is. Let us talk for 55 years, then we'll have equal time. I'm really not interested in debating anybody. I would do it as a favor to him, and Lex Friedman asked me to do it, and I agreed to do it with him. But that, to me, is like debating if the sky is blue. The sky's blue. We don't need to debate it. Plus, these people he's putting up, or Lex would put up, they're the victims, not the perpetrators. Do you understand? Put up NASA administrator, put up a lying Apollo astronaut like Charles Duke, who has the audacity to say he's a Christian.
That would be mind-blowing to see you debate one of the astronauts.
Yeah, but what I really be debating is the victims of the crime. It's like people who are by their by a scoutmaster. And because their psychology is so twisted, they're defending the scoutmaster. Those are the people they put up, the victims of the deception. I don't want to debate the victims. I want to debate the perpetrators. Put up NASA administrator, assistant NASA administrator, Apollo astronaut. Then we'll have a debate, but they'll never do that because I'm right.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the main reasons that we want to do that, that they want to do that, and I think it's important that happens, is because to give you like an idea of some of the people that go on the internet these days that claim they have the absolute truth, and they talk about things with absolute 100% conviction on stuff. Most of those people are full of shit. I don't think you're full of shit, but you do talk about this stuff with absolute 100% conviction, which I can see how some people get rubbed the wrong way.
Yeah, but that's only after 30 years.
Sure.
A slow process of peeling the onion, going from being the biggest fanboy to the biggest critic. It wasn't overnight. I was like Steve. He sees shadow intersecting, and he still wants to say sunlight can do that, even though he can't reproduce it. I was with you, Steve. I still said the moon missions were real until I see them faking being halfway to the moon with a 1-foot model. If I can go from being the biggest fan to the biggest critic, it's not something I say lightly. Once I see them faking being halfway to the moon, that means they didn't go to the moon. Shadows intersecting, they cannot be duplicated in sunlight. They didn't go. It's the first time a technological milestone couldn't be replicated 50 years later when it should be 1,000 times greater 50 years later, you see? And we have an eyewitness who confessed to a homicide to cover it up. How much more proof do you need? It's only the fact that it's a sweet lie that people don't want to give it up, and it involves their pride, and it involves the God of science. Fortunately, the Messiah of science, AI, just said the moon missions are fake, so there's hope.
And what specific AI was this that said that?
This is Google's neural network. Go to my website, Sibrel.com. At the bottom, there's a link to the article. This is an AI that's not available to the public. It's multiple AIs hooked up together that for 3 days, VIPs in Moscow, Putin was one of them, was allowed to play with. One had it write a symphony, took 2 seconds. One had it write a novel based on these plot points, took 2 seconds. It has a deep fake detector program that has never been wrong. They fed it a video of Biden or Trump that's a deep fake, detects it in 2 seconds. So they fed it pictures from the unmanned Chinese probes that won't die from radiation, and it said this is a real picture of the lunar landscape. In comparison, they showed it an Apollo picture, one after another, of lunar landscapes. It says they're all fake. Fake backdrop, fake foreground, fake astronaut. One even said it's a miniature. It's not even a real big landscape. It's a miniature astronaut doll, and that the footprints are not the way a human would walk. They were stamped out.
Steve, can you find the article on the Google Neural AI and find any kind of external source to this?
Well, yeah, there's a video of it. Go to Sibrel.com.
I mean, that's like something.
No, we have the video of Putin being shown it. Play the video. It's on my website. Or it's one of my links at my YouTube channel. We have Putin being shown that. I didn't produce the video. It's independent. Putin is being shown the video of the AI concluding the moon missions are fake. Doesn't look surprised at all.
Yeah, Steve, so you can find that, Steve. Have you thought about or done like the mental exercise of hypothetically what it would take, what kind of information that would come out that it would take to change your mind back to the moon landings being real?
Well, I've already been converted.
No, yeah. I mean, to be converted back. Do you know what it would take to convert you back to believing that the moon landing did actually happen?
Well, I don't know why Apollo 11 is still in Earth orbit 2 days after the launch when they're supposed to be walking the next day, and the moon travel is supposed to be 3 days away. You don't want to go by Google's.
This isn't Google. This is Brave browser.
Yeah, but the point is, this is an article saying, well, Google didn't really mean it. What we need
is that what this says?
Yeah, we need the video of it that shows the AI being shown the conclusion, and the video of it's at my website. Scroll down. There's a link to it.
Okay, let's see what this says first, just to see what their argument is, and then we'll look at that video. So this is the Space Coast Rocket website. Google's AI technology analysis suggests Apollo 11 moon landing photos are fabricated. Let's read the first paragraph. A recent development in the ongoing debate over the authenticity of the U.S. moon landing photographs has emerged, fueled by artificial intelligence. During the World Tour of Artificial Intelligence event in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin was presented with an AI analysis suggesting that the images of the U.S. astronauts landing on the moon might not be genuine.
And look at the next clip.
The video is removed.
Look at that. Not only is the video not available, the one showing
the account has been terminated.
The account has been terminated. Go to my website. I have a screenshot that says when you click on the original Russian article, okay? The original Russian article, it's scroll down and then breaking, click on that, and then there's a video of it. There's a link to the video. And there's a screenshot that says if you click on the original Russian article that shows that the AI said the moon missions are fake, you'll be associated with child pornography and all the data on your computer will be stolen. It's in the video portion of it. So go to my YouTube channel, which is linked at the bottom, Bart's YouTube channel, and then one of those videos near the top will say AI says the moon missions are fake. Keep going down.
What's it called?
It's under Bart's Moon Landing Films. AI. Just
type in AI and search.
Yeah, there you go. No, the next one.
Second one.
Advanced AI. Yeah, moon pictures are fake. Third one.
Third one.
Okay. Then scroll forward somewhere in here. I did a screenshot of that original link, which shows that the warning. So basically, the original article came out in Russian because it was a Russian event. Vladimir Putin was there. And then the original article, if you copied and pasted it and put it into Google Translate, it wouldn't even translate it.
Oh, really?
You understand? And then there's a screenshot here of it saying that if you click on the original link to the Russian article that says the AI says the moon missions are fake, you'll be associated with child pornography.
How far into this video do we have to go?
Let me see if I can find it here. I might have a still shot of it here that I could send you.
And when did this happen?
This was a little more than a year ago.
A little more than a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2023.
And it's never covered by RT. In fact,
they wouldn't want to do it because you're claiming they want the blackmail. They don't want to.
They made an agreement, just like my friend in the Chinese Space Agency, not to publicly say the moon missions are fake in exchange for who knows what. And China, it's in exchange for space technology that Congress forbid to give them. And Russia, who knows why? He doesn't look surprised, and he looks scared that the truth might come out. So,
did you see the video on the press conference of the head of NASA when they were asking him about the Chinese probes that were going to the dark side of the moon to map the dark side of the moon? And they were asking the head of NASA if we're going to be doing the same thing, sending probes to the dark side to map it and figure stuff out the same way the Chinese are doing it. And he said, no, we have no reason to do that.
Well, that guy, I think his name was Bill, he said the back side of the moon is dark all the time, which is completely wrong. Same like the front side. It's dark and light every 14 days. So the administrator of NASA doesn't even know that there's light and dark on the back side of the moon. And then recently there was a congressman saying, and I'm not sure where the clip is, but it's probably out there somewhere. A congressman said, I think about 2 months ago, we need to beat China to the moon. And I think it's during that UFO disclosure clip.
So you're saying that the dark side of the moon is not always dark?
Well, they call it the dark side of the moon because it's the same side of the moon faces the Earth the whole time.
Right, exactly.
But all the moon has a night and day that's 14 days long. It constantly changes. Just like our Earth goes night to day in 24 hours.
Right.
The moon does it every 14 days.
I see. But the same side of the moon always faces the other way.
Correct. But both our facing side and the side away from the Earth have light and darkness.
Correct.
The same amount.
Right.
The NASA administrator didn't even know that. So it says here, you are trying to access a URL that is suspected of child use or exploitation material.
We will initiate decryption of traffic for possible content and block access as mandated by the Republic Act number 9775 or the Anti-Child Act of 2009. Otherwise, traffic will then be re-encrypted and sent to destination. By proceeding with this session, you are aware and agree that this action will give us access to your data, i.e. source IP address, destination IP address, and destination URL. Would you like to proceed?
So I know it's BS, and I'm afraid to click it.
Now, this was on what website?
This was when you clicked on the original URL to the story in Russian that the AI said that the moon missions are fake.
Wow.
SSL.
Yeah. So that's what it says. It says, don't go to the article that says the AI is fake.
Wow.
On RT, I've left comments. I leave about 1 or 2 comments a year on RT. Mm-hmm. And after this came out, I went to an article that was about AI, some AI story on RT. And I left just a little comment. What about the story about the AI with Putin there declaring that the moon missions are fake? The comment was removed every single time. So they won't even allow a comment there. You see?
Yeah.
So according to my source in the Chinese Space Agency, everyone knows the moon missions are fake. They teach it in school that the moon missions are fake, but they're blackmailing NASA. You see? So the Chinese government never officially said the moon missions are real. The Russian government never said they were real. But they're also not saying they're fake in exchange for blackmail. In the case of China, for technology that Congress forbid them to receive according to congressional law, so the CIA is breaking the law, and who knows what Russia is blackmailing us for. Didn't Nixon visit Russia and China around that time? Didn't he give wheat sales to the mortal enemy Russia below cost? Didn't he suck up to the Chinese leader also during the Apollo program? See, I think they found out, and they're blackmailing us, which is a much better use of the information than just blurting it out.
I mean, the moon landing was such a fundamental pillar of America for the last 55 years. I mean, it's been taught in schools. It's in all the libraries. It is literally woven into the fabric of our being. So to knock out those legs from under America, I can't imagine how catastrophically embarrassing that would be.
Yeah, but what's the alternative? Either we perpetuate a lie and we tell elementary school children and college school children that they went to the moon in 1969 with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, even though today they can only go 1,000th the distance. We keep perpetuating that lie, right? Which is the evil people winning, which is lies winning. Or we admit our mistakes. Kennedy was the most popular president of all time because he admitted his mistakes. Gulf of Tonkin, later, that was during Johnson, who faked the moon landing. But Kennedy said about the Bay of Pigs, it's my fault. He had another mistake, it's my fault. So telling the truth about the moon landing lie is what will restore trust in the American government. It will stop this division between blue and red, because after all, Democratic Johnson was supervising the moon landing. He was there at Cannon Air Force Base, according to Eyewitness, and then Republican Nixon gave it the thumbs up. So both Republicans and Democrats are being cheated, and whose parties have become corrupt. Just ask Bernie Sanders or Ron Paul if an outsider can get a fair shake, and you can't, right? So both parties are corrupt. If Trump wants people to be united and give him a chance to take down the corruption, there's no better tool than to show the American people they were lied to about the moon landing fraud.
Wow. You sure have crossed your T's and dotted your I's, Bart. It's amazing the amount of work that you've done. It really is.
Well, they did fake the moon landing. And that's a sad, sad fact. It took me years to finally admit. But that's, like I said, more profound than if they'd actually gone. We have this great event in human history that mankind has become so depraved and so juvenile that we can't tell the truth to one another. We can't admit that we set a goal that we couldn't achieve. So the most powerful nation on earth lied to their own people, murdered their own people to cover it up. It's a historic proportion, and people are defending it, which is wrong. It's so profound, more profound than if they'd actually gone. And like a cure for cancer, we will not be healed, and mankind in America will never go forward unless we admit that the moon landings were indeed fraudulent.
Thank you for coming and doing this, man. I really appreciate it. That was 3 hours. Where can people find out more about your, obviously we let people know, Sibrel.com, your book, Moon Man, but is there anything else that you plan on doing in the future, near future, any more investigative work regarding this stuff?
All that I say is please link to Sibrel.com in the description, because all of these links are there for free.
Yep.
And I would rather put the moon landing fraud behind me. I would rather never talk about it ever again. There's a gentleman by the name of Ron Perlman who he wants to produce my first feature film and star in it. He says it's a screenplay unlike anyone he's ever read before. We're raising $7 million to do it.
Really?
And so I hope to produce my first feature film. That's my next project. I hope to never talk about the moon landing fraud ever again. CIA, if you're listening, give me the $7 million and I'll never talk about it ever again. I would rather make feature films, that are fictional to inspire people in life.
The CIA is going to come to you and say, Bart, we're going to give you $1 billion. Just shut up about the moon landing.
That'd be great. You know how many CIA agents it takes to screw in a light bulb?
I've heard this. How many?
Well, I can tell you, but then I have to kill you.
Fantastic, man. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. We will link all your stuff below. And anything else we missed that we should talk about, or is that
just pray? Everything? If you believe in God, pray for the truth to come out. And I've sent out over $1,000 of books to the current administration, and I would have done it to the Biden administration as well if they said they were into disclosure. Maybe it will come out. It'll be as beautiful of a moment as the Berlin Wall coming down. We'll be free. And then we can make our government and our world a better place, but only after telling the truth about our worst mistake.
All right. Thanks again.
Sure.
Goodbye, world.
Goodbye.